my online dating partner turned out to be a cold and aloof female leader. During the day, she's my cold and aloof female boss, giving me orders. At night, she's my online girlfriend, treating me with tenderness and care. Chapter 1, My Stunning Female Boss. Lin Yi, hurry up, I want to. Looking at Lee Moran in my arms, squirming and touching herself, I struggled to swallow and, unable to resist, reached out to hold her slim waist. Millimeter. Lee Moran let out a soft moan, closing the distance between us. I was stunned, my eyes wide in shock. Lee Moran, my superior, was now lying naked on my bed, and she was taking the initiative to kiss me. My hands trembled as I embraced her, feeling her smooth skin, and I almost felt like I was going to melt from the sensation. Nervously, my hands moved lower. Lin Yi. Suddenly, her voice rang in my ears. Thud. A folder hit my head, and with a jolt, I jumped up from my chair. The warm, soft scene vanished, replaced by Lee Moran with a cold expression, arms crossed, staring at me. Her piercing, icy gaze seemed like it could cut right through me. Where was the tenderness and allure from before? Ja. It was just a dream. Lead. Lee Zone. I shuddered, lowering my head like a child caught in the act, glancing at her long, white legs. The memory of the dream resurfaced, and I swallowed hard. With legs like hers, if I could have my way, I probably wouldn't need anything else for a whole year. Lin Yi, is this the proposal you came up with? What a load of crap. She scolded me sharply, kicking the scattered papers on the floor in frustration. The papers landed at my feet. Sorry, Lee Zone, I'll fix it right away. I was so frightened by her sharp gaze that I hurriedly crouched down to pick up the papers. By tomorrow morning, if I don't see a proposal that satisfies me, you can get lost. Lee Moran snorted coldly, turned on her heel, and walked out of my office in her high heels, the sound of her steps echoing. Watching her cold, retreating figure, I couldn't help but sigh. Why did it have to be just a dream? How nice would it be if it were real? Sigh. I sighed, looking at the design plan in my hands, immediately feeling a headache. I had already revised this plan 7 or 8 times, so I wasn't Lee Moran satisfied yet. What exactly wasn't right? Damn it, she never tells me. I've been at Hui my women's lingerie for 3 years now, and it feels like Lee Moran is a wild wolf that can never be tamed. No matter how much I flatter her, no matter how hard I work, she always finds fault with something. 3 years and I haven't seen her smile at me once. It's as if she is deliberately targeting me. Complaints aside, thinking about the salary Lee Moran gives me, plus the high medical bills and rent for my sister, who is lying in a hospital bed. Sigh. I forced a smile, picked up the scattered papers from the floor, and sighed again. Returning to my desk, I opened my laptop and stared at the design plan. I spent a long time thinking, still unable to understand what Lee Moran actually wanted. I rubbed my throbbing forehead. Ding dong. Suddenly, a message notification sounded from my phone. I glanced at it. It was from a girl I met on a dating app about a month ago. The app, although marketed as a social networking site, was actually just a hookup platform in disguise. Once you make contact, it's pretty much a tacit understanding of being involved in an ambiguous relationship. And it was this girl who had added me first. We had been chatting for a month, and we really hit it off, though we only usually chatted late at night. Today, however, was unexpected. Chapter 2, It's All an Act. What are you doing? She sent a simple message. I replied, working my ass off. What about you? Don't ask. I just got pissed off by some dumb pig, she replied, adding a crying emoji. I quickly sent a hugging emoji. What happened? Who pissed off my Big Mama? Big Mama was the nickname I gave her. Because her profile picture was of a bra, I made the connection and started calling her that. She wasn't offended by it. In fact, she seemed to like it. Once, I even asked her if they were big. She didn't give a direct answer but said, I guess they're big. Soon after, she replied with a voice message. I quickly put on my headphones and listened. The more I listened, the stranger it felt. What she was describing sounded just like the time I got yelled at by Lee Moran. Could Big Mama actually be Lee Moran? I was stunned, replaying the voice message several times. There is a voice changer on the phone, so I couldn't be sure it was Lee Moran's voice, but the events she described were way too similar to when Lee Moran had scolded me. The design proposal, the designer, it all matched. Could it really be such a coincidence? No way. I forced myself to calm down, opened the door, and quietly made my way to her office. Her office door wasn't fully closed, leaving a crack, and I couldn't help but send her a message. Ding dong. The crisp sound rang out. Lee Moran was lying back in her office chair, and immediately she picked up her phone and tapped on the screen. As her fingers paused, my phone vibrated. Looking at the emoji she sent, I almost burst into tears from excitement. I didn't expect this kind of coincidence in the world. The woman I'd been chatting with on the hookup app turned out to be my cold, aloof boss. If I asked her out, wouldn't that mean? My eyes lit up, and I quickly returned to my office. I started typing a message to ask her out but then deleted it. Even though she didn't know who I was yet, meeting her face to face would give everything away. How could I keep my identity a secret while also conquering this woman? While I was deep in thought, she sent another message. Actually, I'm angry, but I do have some capable subordinates. When I saw that message, I couldn't help but laugh. She knows I have the skills, yet she still acts like I'm useless, always wearing that long face. If she weren't my boss, my superior, I'd probably want to slap her a couple of times to show her what's what. But as much as I thought about it, I didn't have the courage. I still depend on her for a paycheck, after all. Taking a deep breath, I thought, we're in the same company. There's no rush. I'll have plenty of time to ask her out. I quickly replied, you're just one of my subordinates. Don't get so worked up. It's not good for you to get too angry. Millimeter, millimeter. She sent a cute nodding emoji. Looking at the emoji, I fantasized about what it would be like if Lee Moran could smile at me like this in real life. Honestly, Lee Moran was stunning, probably the most beautiful woman I've ever encountered, without exaggeration. White blouse, black pencil skirt, she had the typical office attire of a professional woman. And her aura was amazing. Though she was cold and domineering, she exuded elegance, nobility, and composure. The first time I saw her, I was captivated. Back then, she seemed so out of reach. But who would have thought that someone so noble would be using a hookup app? That gave me hope. I decided to slowly entice her, using this app to learn more of Lee Moran's secrets. Since she always targets me, I decided to send another message. Big Mama, why do you hate your subordinates so much? Chapter 3. Send a photo. How do you know I hate him? She replied quickly. I was shocked when I saw it, and I almost exposed myself, so I hurriedly said, I guessed it. After a short while, I didn't see her reply, and I was afraid that she would be suspicious, so I was about to go out to see. She replied and first apologized, sorry, I received a call. Then she looked a little embarrassed and sent a sentence, alas, it's hard to say, it's embarrassing. Shameful. I was puzzled and even more curious, so I asked, what's embarrassing? You don't know me, I don't know you, we confide in each other on the internet, what's not to say? After another short silence, she replied and told me why she hated me. This reason is ridiculous. On the day I started working, she had a dream that I raped her, and when she woke up, she hated me. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Since she targeted me, I have been wondering almost every day why she hated me so much, but I didn't expect it to be such a ridiculous and absurd reason. I replied with a crying and laughing expression. She immediately sent a pouting expression, what's wrong? Was I really scared by that dream that day? When I saw this pouting expression, I seemed to think of her putting down her cold attitude and acting coquettishly with me. Thinking of her graceful body, I immediately sent a naughty expression, you said you would have that kind of dream, do you usually think about being fucked by your subordinate? As soon as the message was sent, she replied, how is it possible? I felt a little disappointed and asked unwillingly, really? In fact, sometimes when I meet him, I will think of that scene. Otherwise, why would I hate him so much? She replied after a while, and I was angry and funny. It was obviously her own fault, but she pushed the responsibility on me. I have always respected her in vain, and I always reflect on myself, whether I am not doing well enough. So it's this. You said you treat him like this, aren't you afraid that he will get angry one day and really rape you in the office? I smiled evilly, sent a message, and sat waiting for a reply. This time she replied quickly, that coward, how dare he? I couldn't see her expression, but I could feel her disdain and contempt from the words. I frowned and mocked myself first, what a pity, it seems that boy is a waste. After sending this sentence, I sent a naughty expression and added, if it were me, I probably wouldn't be able to help it. She rolled her eyes, you haven't even seen me, how can you not help it? Then send a photo. She asked. No. She refused and replied after a while, "How about you send a photo of yourself first?" I thought about it and found a photo of me and my cousin when we went on a trip in my phone. My cousin is known as a handsome man in the family. Besides, he is somewhat similar to me, so I immediately found his photo and sent it to him. However, I still kept a watchful eye and sent a photo of my cousin wearing a mask. That guy is usually very cool, so in the photo, he deliberately exposed his collarbone, turned sideways, slightly tilted his head, and wore a white shirt and suit pants, giving people a very indifferent, cold and abstinent feeling. After a short while, she sent a shy expression, "I didn't expect you to be so handsome." "Of course." I replied with a smile and immediately asked her for the photo. After a while, she sent a photo, which was also a travel photo. She was wearing sportswear. Although she was wearing a mask, I could still tell at a glance that it was her. I was used to seeing her in professional clothes, and when I saw this sportswear, even if it was not the erotic photo I expected, it still made my eyes light up. The tight sportswear wrapped her perfect body very well, especially the high bulge on her chest, which made people salivate at first sight. I suddenly thought, would Lee Moran be willing to send some more explicit photos later? Chapter 4: Little Apprentice. I thought that one day, if I could really conquer Lee Moran, I would be particularly excited. Unconsciously, I actually set up a tent. Just when I was secretly sighing that I was not doing well, Lee Moran quickly withdrew the photo. After a flash, I came back to my senses. Looking at the word withdrawn, I regretted not saving it. But it doesn't matter. Anyway, I can see it every day. The photo of her wearing sportswear and a mask is not worth saving. If I want to save it, I must save her private photos. "Did you see it?" She replied with a shy expression. I immediately praised her. "I saw it, so beautiful. I gave you the nickname of Big Breasts. It seems that I gave you the right nickname, you are really big." I wanted to take the opportunity to talk to her about some deeper topics. As a result, she replied to me, "I have to go out to meet a client, come back to chat." I sent a hug emoticon. She didn't reply. I reluctantly turned off my phone, got up and hurried to the bathroom, thinking about taking care of it. I bowed slightly, opened the door, and thought about walking quickly to the bathroom, but I actually ran into Lee Moran at the elevator entrance. When she saw me, her brows sank and she shouted, "Lin Yi, don't you change the plan." "Oh, right away," I replied and ran to the bathroom without daring to stay. "Wait a minute." Seeing that I was about to leave, she immediately called me. I stood speechless. "What's wrong, Mr. Lee?" I put my hands in my trouser pockets, trying to hold up my pants and cover up my embarrassment. "If you have a stomachache, go home and rest," Lee Moran said indifferently. For some reason, I actually heard a trace of concern from this cold tone. I knew that she must have thought I had a stomachache when she saw me hunched over, so I felt warm in my heart. "Thank you, Mr. Lee, for your concern." To be honest, I was very touched. After all, Lee Moran had been targeting me for 3 years, and this was the first time he was so kind to me. But I never expected that she would say jokingly, "Don't get me wrong, I just think that with your ability, working overtime for 1 or 2 hours won't solve any problems." Me? I almost cursed out loud. Ding. The elevator is here. She didn't look at me again and walked directly into the elevator. Looking at her charming waist and straight hips twisting, I rubbed my hands in anger and swore in my heart that I must make this plan well and make Lee Moran look at me with new eyes. I went to the toilet, comforted my brother, and then went back to the office to modify the plan. This design plan has been modified dozens of times and there is really nothing to change. The content is fine, it's just that the theme is deviated, or it just didn't catch what Lee Moran wanted in his heart. What does she want? "Master, it's time to get off work, aren't you leaving yet?" It was time to get off work before I knew it. My female apprentice Lu Qianqian pushed the door and called out to me, and her little head popped out of the door. The little girl had a high ponytail, so cute. "I'll think about the plan." I looked up and said, "Then I'll leave first." Lu Qianqian waved at me and turned to leave. As her graceful figure turned around, an inspiration suddenly flashed in my mind. "Qianqian, wait a minute, come in." "What's wrong?" Lu Qianqian walked in with a pout. I looked up and down at Lu Qianqian's figure. She was wearing a pink dress that outlined her figure perfectly. Lu Qianqian was curvy and there was no extra fat on her body. She was the kind of plump girl next door, not the mature plumpness of Lee Moran. She had a unique style. I hurried out and saw that almost everyone in the company had left. I turned back and smiled flutteringly at Lu Qianqian. Qianqian, help master. Why are you still so polite to me? Lu Qianqian smiled, waved her hand and said carelessly, Master, just tell me what you want me to do. Become a breast model now. Ah. Lu Qianqian exclaimed and immediately hugged her chest and shouted, I don't want it. When I heard Lu Qianqian's refusal, I immediately started to flutter. Qianqian, if I can't come up with a plan, Li Moran will fire me. Besides, our department will be implicated. Not only will my job be in jeopardy, but you will also lose your performance. Good Qianqian, you will definitely not stand by and watch me die, right? I deliberately pretended to be pitiful and pulled Lu Qianqian's sleeve, begging. When Lu Qianqian heard it, she immediately held her forehead. Master, stop, I will help, isn't it okay to help? Chapter 5 Perfect Body. I know this little female apprentice is soft-hearted and will definitely not be able to resist my persuasion. To say that she is my female apprentice is not entirely true. It is just that she came to work in the company and I taught her for a period of time. She learns things quickly and can be independent in a short time. We are usually more like a teacher and a friend. I treat her more like a little sister. After all, I am 26 years old and she is only 22 years old. I heard that she agreed to help and happily ran to take out several underwear designed for this marketing plan. Qianqian, please help me. I smiled and picked out the one I thought was the best and handed it to her. She rolled her eyes at me and said coquettishly, turn around. Oh, okay. I turned around immediately. Then I heard the rustling sound of taking off clothes and my heart was itchy, which made me a little dry. When I turned around, I was stunned. As a department manager of a female underwear sales company, I have seen hundreds of underwear models over the years. Sometimes I feel immune to it, just like going to the beach and seeing women wearing swimsuits, it's normal. But I underestimated Lu Qianqian's charm. She is not a professional breast model. At this moment, she is wearing a black lace bra in the marketing plan. It can be said that she perfectly supports this bra. The most important thing is that Lu Qianqian has fair skin, which can cover up all ugliness. Besides, she is a great beauty with a signature oval face and a chubby and cute breath. Take off the top, wear jeans, and the white waist is fully displayed, which is faintly fascinating. Master, you don't stare at me all the time. Lu Qianqian was probably embarrassed by my gaze. She snorted at me and hugged her chest shyly. I quickly retracted my gaze, glanced at her and said, Qianqian, take off your pants too. Ah. Lu Qianqian cried out, Master, you're going too far. No. I shook my head. I was already very grateful that Qianqian agreed to be a breast model. It was indeed a bit too much to ask her to take off her pants. However, the inspiration for the design plan came in the blink of an eye. I still gritted my teeth and said seriously, Qianqian, I have an inspiration, just a little bit short, please, okay? In fact, only Lu Qianqian and I have such a good relationship. I don't think she would agree to it if it was someone else. Knowing that Lu Qianqian is soft-hearted, I deliberately pretended to be very aggrieved. She glared at me helplessly and reached out to pull down her jeans. Looking at her charming legs that were slowly exposed, I took a breath and my eyes fell on her underwear. It was a conservative pair of underwear and there was a cartoon character on it, which seriously affected the beauty of her legs. I frowned, Qianqian, these underwear don't match. It's good if the underwear is comfortable to wear. Lu Qianqian was a little shy and rolled her eyes at me. I immediately became serious and said, Qianqian, you are not professional. As a good underwear marketer, if you don't care about it, how can you satisfy customers? Then no one will see me wearing it, why do I wear it so beautifully? She pouted. I shook my head again, ignored her, and handed her a pair of underwear that matched her bra. Lu Qianqian looked reluctant, but her eyes turned and she suddenly said, Master, I have helped you so much. If I need you later, will you come whenever I call? I nodded without thinking, yes, yes. Lu Qianqian's cunning eyes flashed with a smile of success and then she quickly changed her clothes and whispered, Master, it's done. I turned around and couldn't help but praise, beautiful. Okay, is it done? Lu Qianqian seemed very nervous, her body trembled slightly, she clamped her legs and hugged her chest helplessly. Right away, right away. I glanced at a long sofa stool on the coffee table and shouted, Qianqian, go over and lie down. Chapter 6 Inspiration. Ah. Lu Qianqian hummed in embarrassment again. She felt that this posture was too embarrassing, but she still walked over reluctantly under my pleading eyes. As soon as she lay down, Looking at her perfect body, I couldn't help but walk over and slid my hand along the curve of her body. Lu Qianqian's body trembled, she couldn't help but moan, and a blush appeared on her pretty face. I looked at her charming and sexy body, and my Adam's apple rolled. Qianqian, change your posture. Ah. Qianqian cried out in grievance, Master, it's so embarrassing. Be good. Qianqian, just like I usually take you to take model photos, pose. I coaxed Lu Qianqian. I also reached out and pulled her hand. She pouts reluctantly and starts to pose. Lie down, lie down. I gradually got the feeling and shouted immediately. Lu Qianqian looked at me helplessly, then turned around, supported the sofa with both hands, and half knelt there. She really has the potential to be a model. When she knelt down, she raised her head slightly and lifted her hips, looking charming. I was trembling all over and swallowing my saliva. A flash of inspiration came to my mind, and countless professional knowledge came to my mind and gathered together. I understand, I understand. I shouted excitedly, took the paper and pen, bit the pen tip, and quickly wrote on the paper, Youth is infinite, budding and ready to bloom. Master, is it done? Lu Qianqian asked me and twisted her waist. Well, good. I looked back at her, swallowed my saliva, and hurriedly shouted, Qianqian, you put on your clothes first. Oh. Lu Qianqian responded, got up and put on her clothes, but when she saw me looking at her, she stared at me with her clothes. I just reacted and turned my head quickly, listening to the sound of her taking off her clothes and changing clothes. Her graceful body appeared in my mind, and I swallowed my saliva. I really didn't expect that Lu Qianqian would be so sexy and graceful after taking off her clothes. My heart was a little trembling. Master, you are such a fool. After Lu Qianqian changed, she suddenly walked to my side and said. I was stunned and asked, what fool? Humph. I won't tell you. Lu Qianqian pouted at me, walked to the door, and made a face at me slightly. Master, I'm leaving. Oh. I responded. Seeing her cute appearance, I was still very relieved to have such a female apprentice. With inspiration, everything goes smoothly and naturally. The reason why Lee Moran was not satisfied with the previous 7 or 8 design plans was nothing more than losing the soul and being stereotyped. It can also be said that we positioned it wrong from the beginning. From the beginning of the design, it was misled to think that it was a bra designed for married women or mothers. Forget that this type of female population needs their lost youth. And they all have men, so naturally they need to buy from the perspective of men's appreciation. Lu Qianqian helped me a lot. I worked until late at night, and only after drawing the last stroke of the design plan did I let out a long sigh. When I looked at the time, it was already 1 o'clock in the morning. I opened my phone and saw that Lu Qianqian had sent me emoticons, which were a series of crazy emoticons. I frowned in frustration and replied, what's wrong? Ding dong. Just when I was about to pack up and prepare to go home, Lu Qianqian's message came back, this time with a bunch of angry emoticons. Then there was a voice, Master, you are a bastard, you know. I was still puzzled. I knew that a little girl of this age would be moody, so I didn't blame her. I replied perfunctorily, okay, I'll treat you to a big meal another day, go to bed early. I walked over to tidy up the pajamas that Lu Qianqian had just tried on the sofa. When I picked it up, why did it feel a little wet? I picked it up and saw that it was the underwear that Lu Qianqian had tried on. It suddenly dawned on me that the little girl had just been horny, so she was angry. Was she horny to me? Chapter 7 Encountering a drunk lady boss on the road. I pinched my wet panties and stared in disbelief, because I heard from the girl that she had a boyfriend and they were in love. I have been a colleague for 2 or 3 years and have always treated her as a little sister. When I asked her to help me model and find inspiration, I was indeed shocked by her beauty and figure. At that moment, I admit that I also had an impulse, but I quickly controlled it. I didn't expect the girl to. I smiled awkwardly, picked up my phone, and looked at the message sent by Lu Qianqian. It was a wronged little girl's expression. I wanted to comfort her, but it was so late again. If her boyfriend was there, it would be bad if she misunderstood. I thought about it and shook my head, left the office, and took the elevator downstairs. I saw the empty streets and knew that the subway and bus had stopped at this time. It seems I have to walk home. I smiled bitterly. Since my sister's accident, I have not been willing to spend a penny more. Although life has been a little hard in the past 2 years, I think that as long as my sister has the opportunity to be treated, all the suffering is worth it. I took a deep breath and walked towards my place. If I walked faster, I would arrive in half an hour. It was no big deal. Comforting myself, I quickened my pace. Mr. Jew, don't be like this, let me go. When I passed by the entrance of a hotel, I heard a familiar voice. I frowned and looked back. It was Lee Moran. As she swayed, I knew she was drunk. There was a middle-aged man standing next to her. He was dressed in a suit and looked decent, but he stared at Lee Moran with a wretched face. At this time, a car drove up from the basement and turned to the entrance of the hotel. Mr. Lee, the car is here. I'll take you home. The middle-aged man reached out to help Lee Moran. Get out, don't touch me. Watching from the side, I almost couldn't help but walk up. At this time, the middle-aged male driver came down. The middle-aged man immediately winked at the driver, who nodded. The two stood aside and approached Lee Moran like thieves. Mr. Lee, I'll take you home. The middle-aged man tentatively stretched out his hand while coaxing Lee Moran. No. Lee Moran murmured, probably reaching his limit. His body swayed and softened, slid down the pillar, and sat directly on the ground. It's hard for me to imagine that the always arrogant Lee Moran would be in such an embarrassing situation. If someone took a photo at this time, her reputation would be ruined. The middle-aged man ran up excitedly, squatted down, and tried to hug Lee Moran. I know he has bad intentions. But looking at the car he drives, Audi A8L, with a driver, and he can eat with Lee Moran, his status must be not low. It's even possible that he is someone from the head office or a supplier of our company at the Party A level. If I go up to help Lee Moran out of trouble, I will offend people and I might lose my job tomorrow. You don't know how to drink, but you deserve it for drinking so much. I cursed angrily, struggling in my heart whether to go up. No. Lee Moran struggled instinctively. How could she resist the middle-aged man and his driver who was 1.8 meters tall? I saw that the two were about to lift her up. I knew what would happen if Lee Moran was taken away. Lee Moran, I really owed you in my last life. I snorted in annoyance and said I didn't want to care, but I felt guilty, so I walked over and scolded, "Hey! What are you doing?" Chapter 8. Send her back. The middle-aged man and the driver were obviously guilty, and they were startled by me. Their hands slipped and Lee Moran sat on the ground again. This time, she didn't lean on the pillar, but just lay flat on the ground. I was angry when I saw her drunken appearance, but I didn't show it when I saw the middle-aged man and the driver staring at me. I snorted and said, "What are you looking at?" "This is my girlfriend." I walked up to Lee Moran, squatted down, stretched out my hand and pulled her and shouted, "Moran, wake up. Your girlfriend, why haven't I heard Mr. Lee say that she has a boyfriend? I think you are looking for trouble, right?" The middle-aged man shouted angrily and pulled the sleeves of his suit. "Who are you?" "I'm her boyfriend." "Why should I tell you?" I looked up and glared at her without fear. I'm not afraid of a fight. Before my sister got into trouble, I was always a fitness fanatic and learned taekwondo for a few years. My tendon muscles are not for nothing. The middle-aged man was obviously frightened by me and glanced at his driver. "Moran, are we going back?" I was too lazy to pay attention to the two of them and reached out to wrap my hand around her arm to help her up. She really drank too much and her body was limp. I gritted my teeth and put my other hand around her knees to pick her up. "No, don't." As soon as I picked her up, Lee Moran started shouting. Her body was still shaking, as if she was afraid of something. I could feel her pushing me, but she had drunk too much and she didn't have the strength to push me away. "Moran, stop it." I was afraid that the middle-aged man would see the clues, so I called her and hurriedly hugged her tightly. I stood up and saw the middle-aged man still staring at me with anger. I snorted and pretended to be angry. "What are you looking at? Who told you to get my girlfriend drunk like this? Boy, you have guts, I'll remember you." The middle-aged man was frightened by my toughness and said something harsh to me, gritted his teeth, and waved to the driver, "Let's go." The driver reacted and immediately went out to drive. When he passed me, he snorted at me, "Boy, dare to offend Mr. Jew, you're dead. I'll die, you big-head ghost." I glared at him and didn't bother to pay attention to him. When I saw them leave, I picked up Lee Moran with difficulty and walked out, and I was in a dilemma. I don't know where her home is. How can I send her back? Go to my house? She is so drunk, I don't know if she will blame me when she wakes up tomorrow. Lee Moran, did I owe you in my last life? I took a deep breath and looked around. I was worried about sending her to the hotel. I hesitated and thought I should get her to my place first. Just as I picked her up and walked forward, Lee Moran suddenly shouted again, "No, don't touch me." I was startled and I was relieved to see that she was still asleep. I saw that she was carrying a bag in her hand and reached into the bag to touch the car key. I was happy in my heart, at least I could save some taxi fare. "Mr. Lee, I'll take you home now." I knew she couldn't hear me at this time, but I still said it, and I pushed my waist hard to hold her up. Her sexy body was close to me, one hand around her waist and the other hand holding her hips. The touch was really wonderful. I was a little dazed. I saw someone coming out of the hotel. I was startled and hurried out. I took out the key from my bag with difficulty. I freed my hand to grab the key and kept pressing it, looking for the location of her car. Fortunately, her car was parked not far from the roadside of the hotel. I breathed a sigh of relief when I saw the headlights flashing. I quickly hugged her and walked over. Don't. Lee Moran was still shouting. She drank too much and pushed me more and more weakly. She obviously wanted me not to touch her, but she only had 2 words left after shouting. "Don't." I looked down at her painful face. Her expression was too much like the expression when we were in love in bed. Chapter 9 Kissed her lips. Gurgle. I swallowed my saliva and walked to the back seat to open the door. "Mr. Lee, cheer up. We'll be home soon." I held her in the car with difficulty and put her down carefully. "No." She shook her head and shouted again, stretched out her hand and grabbed my tie. I just put her down and wanted to help her move her legs. I stumbled and was grabbed by her. I threw my body forward and pressed my whole body against her soft body. She moaned subconsciously. Holding her soft body and looking at her charming face, my breath almost stopped. She was so beautiful, so beautiful. Especially her dazzling red lips. The dim street lights shone on her face through the car window. In the haze, she constantly exuded an alluring breath. One of my hands just happened to be on her chest. It was soft and full of elasticity, and I couldn't help but pinch it. "No." She subconsciously twisted her body and shouted at me. I woke up suddenly, got up quickly, and slid my hand over her beautiful legs. I felt like I was electrocuted. Seeing her drunk and unconscious, she was shouting and struggling, all subconsciously. Looking at that pair of beautiful legs and the rolled-up hip skirt, I thought how comfortable it would be to touch them. But I really couldn't do such a thing of taking advantage of someone's misfortune. I took a deep breath, resisted the urge in my heart, and stood up. I closed the car door, walked to the driver's seat and sat down. I couldn't calm down for a long time. I looked at the central control of the car and saw a half bottle of soda water. I reached out and took it, not caring whether someone had drunk it before, unscrewed it and gulped down a few gulps. I felt much calmer. I looked at the bottle, it was Evian brand, and there was a blurry lipstick mark on the bottle mouth. The color was the lipstick color that Lee Moran often wore. Is this considered an indirect kiss with her? I looked back at Lee Moran and saw that she was lying peacefully at the moment and laughed at myself. Started the car and drove directly to my house. Haiwan City is a place where every inch of land is worth a lot of money. The house price and rent are very expensive. Even if I rent the cheapest house, it costs 1,500 yuan a month. The house is rotten to death and I rent the first floor that no one wants. However, this time, the first floor is much more convenient for me. The car drove directly into the yard. I got out of the car and walked to the back seat. I patted Lee Moran first. "Mr. Lee, we are here. Let's go to the house and sleep." Lee Moran didn't respond. "Mr. Lee, then I will carry you in." I shouted and reached out to hug her. I kept admonishing myself in my heart that I should not have any covetous thoughts. This woman is not someone I can afford with my status. If she misunderstands something, my job will be lost and my sister will die. I thought of the most serious problem and then hugged her soft body. All my thoughts were in vain. Her enchanting body pressed against me was too tempting, and she was completely drunk at this time. Motionless, letting others do whatever they want. Hold on. I gritted my teeth, picked her up, opened the door and went into the house and put her on the bed. I was already exhausted and panting, so I also lay down on the bed, just in front of her face, and saw her squinting. The breath blew over with rapid breathing. I didn't smell any alcohol. I frowned. Didn't she drink alcohol? How could this happen? My mind instantly thought of those aphrodisiacs and rape drugs I saw on the internet. Did Lee Moran get drugged by the bastard just now? Chapter 10 Can't help it. My head buzzed. Didn't they show on TV that if they were drugged, they would take the initiative to find the man? Will she pounce on me later? Press me under her body and asked for it madly. Just like in the dream. Thinking of this, I was a little excited and began to look forward to the effect of Lee Moran's drug. But 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes passed. Lee Moran didn't move at all, sleeping there like a little sow. Damn it. It was just a drug. I got up from the bed disappointedly and turned on the light. The room was immediately bright. I looked back at Lee Moran lying flat on her back. Her charming and sexy body was so attractive. Her figure can be said to be perfect to the extreme. Especially her open hands, revealing her full breasts, her clothes seemed to be bursting open. I took a look and couldn't turn my eyes away. I saw that a button of her white shirt was missing and her white and tender fullness emerged. Gulp. I swallowed my saliva and an evil thought surged in my mind. In her current state, she would not resist if I did it to her. Besides, she was originally playing the hookup software. It doesn't matter who I do it to, right? I just thought that if I really fucked her, what difference would that make me and the two beasts at the door of the hotel just now? Besides, I don't want to lose my first time inexplicably. Yes, I am still a real virgin. It's embarrassing to say it out loud. I'm 26 years old and still a virgin. I'm embarrassed to say it in the company. Lee Moran, I owe you in my last life. I really couldn't stand the temptation of Lee Moran. I resisted the impulse in my heart and walked up to her with trembling hands to help her button up, so that Lee Moran wouldn't blame me for taking it off tomorrow. I stretched out my hand to look at her plump and white position, and I couldn't help swallowing my saliva. My hands trembled and I pressed them against her two big white rabbits. The elastic and smooth touch made me almost faint. No, don't touch me. She suddenly murmured, turned over and hooked her neck. I was half kneeling there and she hooked me and I rushed towards her and by chance I kissed her little mouth. When I felt the warmth, I widened my eyes and trembled in my heart to comfort her. Lee Moran, this you pulled me, don't blame me. I felt the warmth of her red lips and saw that she closed her eyes. I was afraid that she would wake up suddenly, so I quickly got up and pushed her away, sat on the bed, touched my lips and looked at her. I felt happy and excited as if I had eaten honey. I actually kissed Lee Moran. This is something I dare not think about normally, but I think about the hookup software Lee Moran used and I don't know how many people he has dated. I don't know how many people have kissed her red lips and I don't know if she has sucked them for others. I was so excited just by kissing her. What a fool. I laughed at myself. Seeing that Lee Moran was still wearing shoes, I hooked the bed sheet, leaving a black mark on the bed sheet by the heel of the shoe. I was shocked. I just changed the bed sheet. If it was dirty, I would have to wash it. I quickly reached out to take off her shoes. As soon as my hand touched his little feet, I felt smooth and delicate. I couldn't help but pinch it and my hand gently stroked it, slowly moving up. Chapter 11 My sister suddenly got sick. It was my instinctive hand sliding upwards, as if I had touched a piece of fine jade, and I couldn't help but want to play with it. My hand couldn't help but keep moving upwards. Every inch of her was almost full of elasticity and seductive breath. I couldn't help but keep sliding upwards, sliding to the bottom of her skirt, gently leaning towards her, gradually lost in her fragrance and wanting to bow down under her pomegranate skirt. Lee Moran moaned, her body trembled. I was startled, hurriedly pulled back my hand, looked at her, and was relieved to see that she didn't wake up. It was a close call, I almost lost control. I took a deep breath and quickly took off her other shoe. Now I dare not touch her little feet, for fear that I will really lose control later. Fortunately, I don't have that kind of special fetish. If she had the SM and corpse X fetish, she would definitely not be able to escape with Lee Moran's graceful body lying there. I looked at the time and it was already 4 o'clock in the morning. Oh my goodness. I didn't expect that she would make such a fuss and it was already 4 o'clock in the morning. I cleaned up and just wanted to lie down for a while. I didn't expect that just as I lay down, I received a call from Aunt Chen in the hospital, saying that my sister was sent to the emergency room. I was so scared that my legs went weak, and I hurriedly drove Lee Moran's car to the hospital. Just arrived at the hospital. Aunt Chen, the nurse I hired, greeted me when she saw me coming, and looked at me apologetically. Lin Yi, Aunt Chen, it's okay. I reached out and wiped the tears from Aunt Chen's eyes. I was also panicking, but I chose to comfort Aunt Chen. Don't cry, Xiao Minute will be fine. Comforting Aunt Chen, in fact, was also comforting myself. Lin Minute has chronic leukemia. She can't find a suitable bone marrow transplant and can only be relieved by daily hospitalization. Once an attack occurs, her life may be in danger at any time. Lin Yi, it's actually my fault. I didn't take care of Xiao Minute. Aunt Chen cried with self-blame. I saw her tearful look and didn't know how to comfort her. For Aunt Chen, the nurse. I have always been grateful to her. We are not related. Since I hired her, she has been taking care of Xiao Minute without complaint. Many times I didn't pay her salary in time, but she didn't complain. Seeing that she was much more haggard than before, I hugged her distressedly. Aunt Chen, don't blame you, you have done well enough. Yeah. Aunt Chen nodded. Soon the lights in the emergency room dimmed. Seeing Xiao Minute lying on a stretcher and pushed out, with a pale face and full of instruments, my heart seemed to be torn apart. Although Xiao Minute and I are not born by the same father and mother. She is just adopted by my parents. Since my parents passed away early, I have been living with her for more than 20 years. I have long regarded her as the most important woman in my life, closer than my own sister. Xiao Minute. I was about to walk over, but Aunt Chen was more excited than I was. Sometimes I wonder if Aunt Chen is Xiao Min's biological mother, but it's not very realistic. If she is Xiao Min's biological mother, how could she wait until Xiao Minute got sick before recognizing her? Besides, she doesn't look like Xiao Minute. Although I was worried about Xiao Minute, I kept my composure and didn't rush to see Xiao Minute. Instead, I waited for the emergency doctor to come out and walked over to ask, Doctor, how is my sister's condition? The situation is a bit grim. If I can't find a suitable bone marrow, I'm afraid I can't hold on for long. Xiao Minute has lived here for almost a year. The attending physician is familiar with me and didn't hide it from me. He told me directly, I suggest you prepare the surgery fee first and you can have the surgery directly after the bone marrow is found. How much is the handling fee? She asked. Pay 300,000 first. This will also help support your sister's hospitalization. The attending doctor left after saying that. I sat alone on a bench in the corridor, unable to come back to my senses for a long time. I could have taken out 300,000 a year ago, but this year, Xiao Min's hospitalization has already entered all my savings and I have borrowed a lot of money. 300,000. It is undoubtedly a huge sum of money for me. Chapter 12 300,000 medical expenses. 300,000. When I was thinking about where to get this money, Aunt Chen came out and said to me, Xiao Yi, Xiao Minute has woken up and she wants to see you. Yeah. I nodded. Walking into the ward, looking at the haggard Xiao Minute, my heart was broken. Brother, it hurts. She called me in a weak voice. I reached out and touched her forehead distressedly. Xiao Minute, it's okay. I'm here, everything will be fine. Brother, I don't want to be treated anymore, can you let me go? Xiao Minute said with tears in her eyes. Silly, don't say nonsense. As long as I'm here, I won't let anything happen to you. Have a good rest, okay? I leaned over and kissed her forehead, then stood up and walked out of the ward. Aunt Chen was standing at the door. I walked up and took out all the more than 1,000 yuan in cash on my body and handed it to her. Xiao Yi, why are you giving me money? Aunt Chen immediately pushed the money back to me. I held her hand. Aunt Chen, just keep it. I know how tired you are taking care of Xiao Minute during this period. If you keep it, it will be more convenient for me to buy things for Xiao Minute. Over. Aunt Chen looked at me with tears in her eyes. Seeing her moving appearance, I didn't know what to say for a moment. I was still very touched by her hardworking and uncomplaining care for more than a year, but I just couldn't understand how there could be such a good woman. If she looked a little like Xiaomin, I would suspect that she was Xiaomin's relative. It's a pity that the two of them are too different. If Xiaomin hadn't been sick, she would have been a real beauty, but her face was oval. Aunt Chen has a melon-seed face. She usually wears trousers and t-shirts to take care of Xiaomin in the hospital and can't dress up her graceful figure. In addition, she looks particularly pale and haggard after taking care of Xiaomin for a long time. Aunt Chen, you have worked hard for so long. Why don't you go back to sleep at night and I will stay here with Xiaomin? I said to Aunt Chen. Aunt Chen shook her head. I'm fine, Xiaoyi, you should go back and rest quickly. Xiaomin's medical expenses still depend on you. I thought about it and was really worried. And Lee Moran is still lying at home. I don't know if he will get into trouble. After hesitating for a moment, I told Aunt Chen a few words and went to drive. I've been going through so much trouble. When I got to where I was staying, it was already dawn. After getting off the car, I didn't know if Lee Moran had woken up. I stood at the door for a long time before I reached out and pushed the door open and walked in. I saw Lee Moran sitting by my bed with a dark face. When she saw me coming in, she stood up, walked up, and slapped me. I was stunned. After a night of torture and my sister doing this again, a surge of anger suddenly surged. Lee Moran, are you crazy? I touched my face, turned around and glared at Lee Moran, raising my hand to hit him back. Lee Moran's eyes flickered and his expression was extremely complicated. He probably didn't expect me to get angry. He glanced at my raised hand, didn't retreat, but took a step forward. I saw her approaching and instinctively stepped back. What are you going to do? Aren't you going to hit me? Lee Moran stared at me and asked. I was instantly at a loss for words. I didn't understand what she was thinking. When I hit her, she moved forward. It was just one night of sleeplessness and I was very angry. If I were slapped by her normally, I would not dare to say a word. But being stared at by her cold eyes also calmed me down a lot, not to mention my sister's 300,000 yuan surgery fee. If I lose my job, I'm afraid I can't even pay the rent. I took a deep breath and bowed my head to apologize. Mr. Lee, I'm sorry. Lee Moran rolled his eyes and glanced at me, and said to me in an imperative tone, don't go to work today, go buy some decent clothes and come with me to the airport to pick someone up later. Chapter 13 Help Buy Clothes. After Lee Moran gave the order, he walked into the house, took out a credit card from his bag and handed it to me. This is your reward for saving me last night. Happiness came too suddenly and I was a little uncomfortable. Looking at the credit card she handed over, I took it carefully and asked, Mr. Lee, can I buy anything? Yes. She moaned and looked at herself. By the way, buy me some clothes. Okay. I nodded happily and turned to leave. Hey. Lee Moran called me and paused, saying, underwear, too. Remember to take it to the dry cleaner and dry it before bringing it back. Understood. I clearly saw a blush on her pretty face. I instantly felt that she was not as annoying as I imagined, but rather charming. I drove her Porsche Cayenne directly. It's convenient to go anywhere with a car. Sitting in the car, I wished that this car could be mine, but unfortunately, with my current state, I couldn't afford a car at all, and I also had to consider my sister's 300,000 medical expenses. Where should I get it or where should I borrow it? Before I knew it, I arrived at the mall. She asked me to buy some decent clothes. I came from the mountains and never bought good clothes since I was a child. Even though I knew I was spending Lee Moran's money, I still couldn't bear it. In the end, I bought a set of sportswear with a relatively high cost-effectiveness. When I bought for Lee Moran, it was different. I didn't buy according to her usual dressing style, but bought a student-style pleated skirt, OL outfit. When I thought of wearing this combination on her, I felt like my nose was bleeding. The most fatal thing was when choosing underwear. Her cup size and that piece of tender white appeared in my mind, and I was afraid of making a fool of myself in the mall. However, there were not many opportunities to choose underwear for her, so I went directly to the Hui Mai direct store and picked out a pair of C-shaped pants designed by me and a translucent lace bra. When I thought of Lee Moran wearing this, my heart jumped to my throat with excitement. After taking it to dry cleaning and drying, I couldn't wait to carry the bag back to the rental house. I went back to my room. Of course I didn't knock on the door, I just pushed it open and went in. Ah. As soon as I pushed in, Lee Moran, who was blowing her hair, cried out softly, turned her head and glared at me, angrily saying, "What are you doing? Here are your clothes." My eyes fell on Lee Moran and I couldn't turn them away at all. She had just finished taking a shower and was blowing her hair with her face tilted to the side, full of charm. The most fatal thing was that she was wrapped in a bath towel, which was the bath towel I usually used for bathing. Men's bath towels were not much bigger. The bath towel was wrapped around her body, covering half of her upper body, and the lower part just covered her buttocks. Which man could stand it? "Drop your clothes and get out." She glared and shouted angrily. "Oh." I responded with a surge in my throat, put my clothes aside, and walked out the door. Although peeking would definitely provoke Lee Moran, I couldn't help but secretly glance at them. Looking at those smooth white legs, my throat was so dry. I walked out and closed the door, and then I felt relieved. Lee Moran was so tempting. How good a man should be to match such an excellent woman. No. She has used hookup apps, so I don't know how many times she has been hooked up and how many men have violated her. Her status in my mind suddenly dropped. She came out quickly, wearing the school uniform I bought, with white and slender thighs, a floating pleated skirt, and a pure and lovely look. I was completely stunned. If the hookup app pulled her status down from the altar in my mind. At this time, her pure and pretty appearance in the school uniform once again established her image in my mind. Lin Yi, did you do it on purpose? She looked at me angrily. Of course I didn't dare to say it was intentional and hurriedly explained, Mr. Lee, if you didn't say you didn't go to work today, I want to wear this to look younger. What about the underwear? She shouted at me directly. Chapter 14 Misunderstanding. I was startled by her loud voice, shrank my head, and smiled flatteringly. Underwear, I haven't seen what style you like, so I bought the most popular one of our Who Am I recently. I will be the first to know the sales data of Who Am I every month so that I can understand the market better. What I bought for Lee Moran is indeed the best-selling Who Am I brand in the country. Lee Moran gave me a perfect answer and said helplessly, go change your clothes and then go out with me. Okay. I responded and went into the house to change clothes. Seeing Lee Moran still standing in the house, I grinned at her. She glared at me and walked out. I glanced at the pair of beautiful legs in the pleated skirt. When it fluttered, her small buttocks seemed to be exposed. I couldn't help but praise it again. Lee Moran's legs are really top-notch. It's a pity that I can't afford her. I am a pragmatic person. I can also say that I have been poor since I was a child. I am relatively cautious in doing things. I like to take one step at a time and do things steadily. Lee Moran is indeed attractive, but I know she is not my type. What I didn't expect was that she actually used a hookup app. I was curious about how many people she had dated before me. When I thought about this, I got angry for no reason. I snorted and went into the bathroom to change clothes. As soon as I entered, I saw Lee Moran's changed clothes on the shelf. Underwear was placed on it. As a female underwear designer, I am immune to these things. I just thought in my mind that it was Lee Moran who wore it, close-fitting, gulp. I couldn't help swallowing. Just wanted to reach out to help her put it aside. Dong. The door was pushed open by Lee Moran. I looked back and saw Lee Moran's cold eyes. I hurriedly explained, Mr. Lee, it's not what you think. In a hurry, I actually hooked Lee Moran's underwear straps and lifted them up directly. I smiled bitterly and thought to myself that it was over. This time, Lee Moran must have misunderstood that I had some fetish. Pervert. Lee Moran said coquettishly, walked into the house and took her bag, glanced at me and turned around and walked out. I looked at the underwear hanging in my hand and I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I quickly changed my clothes and walked out. I saw Lee Moran sitting in the passenger seat and I walked over and was about to explain. Drive. She lowered her head and snorted coldly. I turned around and walked to the driver's seat, sat in, and while fastening the seat belt, I explained, Mr. Lee, I just wanted to help you clean up just now, don't misunderstand. I don't want that clothes anymore, you can do whatever you want, don't explain to me. Lee Moran said coldly, without even raising his head. I don't know what she thinks, doesn't she care if I mess around with her underwear? Mr. Lee, I really just want to help you clean up. I still want to explain it to her clearly, so that she won't misunderstand that it was just a dream to find out the reason why she hates me from the hookup app. It was obvious that she was not a generous person. She would misunderstand that I took her underwear to do some messy things. Wouldn't she hate me even more? But this time she didn't rush to answer me. She put away her phone and turned to stare at me. Lin Yi, you explained these to me, what do you want to express? Seeing her cold eyes, I didn't know how to answer for a moment. Drive. She snorted and lowered her head to play with her phone again. I doubted whether she was playing the hookup app and looking for a hookup partner. Chapter 15 Nightmare. I had no choice but to reverse out and saw that she was still playing with her phone. She asked unhappily, where are you going? The airport. She said coldly, lowered her head, played with her phone, and smiled from time to time. The more I looked at her, the more I doubted who she was chatting with, whether she was playing the hookup app, and when the car turned a corner several times. I secretly glanced at her phone, but unfortunately she had put on a privacy film, so I couldn't see who she was chatting with. The more this happened, the more suspicious and curious I became. Drive well, I'll take a nap. Just when I wanted to try again to see if I could see it, she suddenly put down her phone and said to me. Seeing me looking at her, her eyebrows obviously sank. I quickly responded, "Oh." I glanced around casually, pretending that I didn't accidentally see her. She didn't say anything and laid down her seat to sleep. She also leaned towards the window, with her back to me, her skirt up, and her sexy buttocks were so naked in front of me. If this pleated skirt hadn't been protected by safety pants, I would have been able to see everything underneath her. I regretted buying the one with safety pants, otherwise I would have had a feast for my eyes. After the meeting, I looked back at Lee Moran and saw that she turned over, squinting her eyes, looking peaceful, so beautiful, I almost lost myself in it. Click at the horn of an oncoming car woke me up. I quickly steadied the steering wheel and looked forward. When we were in a straight line, I couldn't help but glance at her. I was relieved to see that she was not woken up. But seeing her frowning while sleeping, I couldn't help but feel that it was not easy for her. It made sense when I thought about it. A woman supporting such a big company with hundreds of people eating with her, how could she not have any pressure? I immediately closed all the windows and the car immediately became quiet. I could even hear her even breathing clearly. I couldn't help but frown when I saw that she was sleeping so soundly. It should be me who didn't sleep last night. She asked me to drive, but she slept so soundly. Don't. Just when I was complaining, she suddenly shouted. I was startled. I looked back and saw that she didn't wake up, but was just talking in her sleep. I was curious about what she was dreaming about and why she shouted no. Could it be that she dreamed of being fucked by me again? I glared and glanced back. I saw her body trembling slightly. She closed her eyes, her eyeballs moving back and forth under her eyelids, and her breathing became rapid, as if she was in great pain. No. Don't. She snorted again. I was shocked. Could it be that I was really dreaming about that? I took a deep breath and looked ahead. I just happened to be able to stop the car. I quickly parked the car to the side, pulled the handbrake, and turned sideways to look at her. I saw her body trembling more and more, and her facial expression became more and more uncomfortable. Although it was very tempting, I was still worried about whether there would be an accident. I quickly pushed her and shouted, "Mr. Lee, what's wrong?" "Ah." She cried out softly and sat up, looking ahead with empty eyes. "Mr. Lee." I whispered. Lee Moran turned his head and looked at me coldly. I was scared by her cold eyes, scratched my head and asked, "What's wrong?" "Did I just talk in my sleep?" she asked. I shook my head, and seeing her staring at me, I nodded again, and smiled and said, "Mr. Lee, I didn't say anything, I just shouted a few words." "What did you shout?" She stared at me and asked. I smiled awkwardly. "Do you really want to say it?" "What do you think?" she asked back. I took a deep breath and said, "Actually, it's nothing, you just shouted, don't." Chapter 16 The Boss Lady's Best Friend. Lee Moran's brows suddenly sank, and she looked at me very seriously. That expression didn't match her pleated skirt and school uniform at all. I smiled awkwardly and said, "Mr. Lee, this is what you want me to say. Let's go." She glanced at me coldly and lay down again. As soon as I saw her solemn expression, I knew she was in a bad mood, so I drove obediently. Just arrived at the airport. I saw Lee Moran getting off the car, and I walked towards a girl in a beige dress. "Oh." When the girl saw that it was Lee Moran, she opened her arms and hugged Lee Moran. The two beauties hugged each other. I sat in the car and took a closer look at the girl hugging Lee Moran. Her graceful figure was not inferior to Lee Moran at all. Later, I learned that this person was Lee Moran's best friend, Yu Minyan. Birds of a feather flock together. It is normal for a beautiful woman like Lee Moran to have a beautiful best friend. Beautiful women are always likable, and Yu Minyan's delicate oval face makes her look more amiable than Lee Moran. Seeing them asking about each other's well-being, I guessed that they would not get on the car so soon, so I walked down. As soon as I got off the bus and walked over, Lee Moran waved at me. "I just got off. Come and help carry the luggage." "Carry the luggage?" "Me?" I pointed at myself, still a little bit unconvinced that Lee Moran was calling me. "If it's not you, could it be me?" Lee Moran snorted, looked back and hugged Yu Minyan's shoulders, smiling coquettishly. I have known Lee Moran for such a long time, and I have never seen her smile so happily. Thinking that she is a designer after all. Being a free driver and a free laborer, I walked over with a little reluctance. When I reached out to grab Yu Minyan's suitcase, Yu Minyang suddenly leaned close to my ear and said in a sweet voice, "Thank you for your hard work, handsome guy." I looked up and saw her squinting eyes, like a charming big sister next door, and was stunned for a moment. "What are you doing?" Lee Moran shouted. I just reacted, glanced at Yu Minyang, and hurriedly picked up the suitcase. I didn't expect that I used too much force, stumbled, and almost fell. Hee hee. Yu Minyang covered her mouth and giggled happily, turned around and hugged Lee Moran's arm charmingly. "Moran, is this your driver?" "So cute." "Driver?" My forehead wrinkled into a black line, opened my hands and looked at myself. I don't understand how Yu Minyang can tell that I am a driver. But Lee Moran didn't explain, turned his head and glanced at me and said, "I guess so." When I heard it, I wanted to refute. But Yu Minyang happily stuck to Lee Moran and said, "Great, Moran, then lend me your driver for 2 days." Play for 2 days. I was stunned. Lee Moran also looked back at me in astonishment and then turned back to look at Yu Minyang. "Minyang, what are you doing?" "Haha, Moran saw that you were anxious." I said I wanted to play for 2 days, but I just wanted him to be my driver for 2 days. Yu Minyang giggled, and her enchanting body was swaying forward and backward, which was really tempting. I saw that many people in the airport square were looking at us. When they looked at Lee Moran and Yu Minyang, their eyes lit up, but when they glanced at me, they turned into disdain. It was obviously jealous, so I deliberately walked faster and followed them closely. When Lee Moran heard Yu Minyang's explanation, he smiled and said, "Minyang, you are here, why do you need a driver? I can accompany you." "You are so busy, I don't want you to accompany me. Besides, I need a handsome guy to accompany me." Yu Minyang giggled, suddenly stopped and turned around, leaned over and said to me, "Handsome guy, are you willing to accompany me?" Chapter 17. Lee Moran is more beautiful. She was wearing a light yellow skirt with a low neckline and a crossbody, which was the most popular some time ago. It was fine if she didn't bend over, but when she bent over slightly, the white tenderness on her chest almost jumped out. I was close to her and almost bumped into her. I leaned back instinctively and looked at Yu Minyang in horror. "What's wrong, handsome boy? Are you unwilling?" Yu Minyang pursed her lips and blinked her bright eyes at me. She looked charming and seductive, as if she was acting coquettishly at you, and as if she wanted to see through you. I was so scared that I hurriedly pinched her suitcase. "Yes." I was about to answer yes, after all, I'm not stupid. She is Lee Moran's best friend. If Lee Moran asked me to accompany her, it would definitely be considered a day off. Only a fool would not be willing to do such a rare opportunity. But I saw Lee Moran also turned back and stared at me. Her cold eyes instantly made my back shiver. I didn't dare to answer, but looked at Lee Moran and said, "I still have to go to work." Hee hee. Yu Minyang smiled happily, stood up and hugged Lee Moran's arm again. "Moran, your little driver is quite afraid of you." Lee Moran smiled without comment. I followed behind and could clearly feel her cold glance at me. I didn't understand what she meant. They got in before me and sat in the back seat. I put the luggage on the car and then sat in the driver's seat. The two girlfriends ignored me at all and chatted and laughed by themselves. From the rearview mirror, I saw the two of them close to each other. I wished I could sit between them. Of course, I was just thinking about it. Not to mention sitting between the two of them, it would be a blessing to sit next to any one of them and hug any one of them. What they discussed were all women's products. What cosmetics, how they were, etc. I was bored listening to it, and I was a little sleepy after not sleeping all night. Fortunately, they would laugh from time to time while chatting. I could clearly see from the rearview mirror that Yu Minyang's appearance was more kind and her smile was more seductive. Lee Moran looked cold, and she was not as pretty as Yu Minyang when she smiled. But after watching her several times, I felt that Lee Moran was more beautiful, even though she looked more serious. In comparison, I still preferred Lee Moran. In a subtle way, I felt that people like Yu Minyang were very scheming. It would be very dangerous to be with her. Although Lee Moran was cold, she would not give people such a feeling. I don't know if it was because I was more familiar with Lee Moran and rarely saw her smile. Now that I saw her smile, I had this illusion. Anyway, I didn't like Yu Minyang very much in my subconscious. I was so sleepy on the way that I wanted to say something to them, but I couldn't get a word in. Fortunately, I drove to Lee Moran's house without any trouble. She lives in the most luxurious villa community in Jinghai, No. 9 Mansion. It's a single-family villa. I've been here before, but I either went to Lee Moran's house or passed by the gate of the community. At that time, I thought that if I could afford number 9 mansion one day, my life would be perfect. I didn't expect Lee Moran to live here. Suddenly, the gap between me and Lee Moran became even bigger. Is selling underwear so profitable? As a designer of a Huimai, I can get sales data every month. Although Huimai sells well, can it make such a big profit? In doubt, I followed them into Lee Moran's villa. I was instantly shocked by the luxury here and couldn't help but turn around and ask Lee Moran, "Mr. Lee, are you the only one living in such a big villa?" Lee Moran didn't answer me, but called Yu Mengyang. "Mengyang, let's go upstairs." "Well, okay." Yu Mengyang smiled and stretched out her hand to me. "Little handsome boy, you have worked hard, give me the suitcase, I'm going upstairs." Her delicate look was really tempting. Looking at her soft hand, I hurriedly pushed the suitcase to her. "Let's go, handsome boy." Yu Mengyang smiled, waved to me, and went upstairs with Lee Moran. I looked up and saw the two of them twisting their skirts, the two pairs of white tender legs, and trembled all over. I quickly retracted my eyes. It was too tempting. I was afraid that I couldn't stand it if I looked at it for too long. I didn't come back to my senses until they walked to the second floor. After picking me up and using me, I was left here. Chapter 18. It's not good if it breaks down. You know, the airport is in the suburbs and it took more than 3 hours to go back and forth. I didn't sleep all night last night and I didn't eat in the morning. Lee Moran used me and left me without a word. I snorted angrily and glared upstairs. But I saw Lee Moran staring at me and I was shocked. "Lin Yi, pick a room downstairs, lie down for a while and send us to dinner in the evening," she said coldly and turned to leave. Yu Mengyang, who entered the room, heard the sound, came out and asked Lee Moran in confusion, "Moran, he is not your driver, didn't you arrange for him to live here?" "No, I live alone, how could I let him live in?" Lee Moran didn't explain to Yu Mengyang that I was not a driver. I stood upstairs and clearly saw her contemptuous look and I felt very unhappy. Does poverty make people have short ambitions? After all, I make a living at Huimai by my own ability. If something goes wrong at work, I have no problem with Lee Moran firing me or scolding me. He makes me a driver and works for free, but he still looks down on me. I was upset and turned around to leave. As soon as I took a step, I saw the luxurious villa. With my own efforts, I am afraid I will never have the opportunity to live here in my life. Now I have a free opportunity. Why should I get angry with a woman? It would be a waste if I don't sleep with her. Anyway, I didn't sleep in vain. I worked hard. I smiled and started to walk around the first floor. At the same time, I heard Yu Mengyang jokingly say to Lee Moran, "Moran, I think the handsome boy is quite honest. Let him live in. It will be more convenient for you to use it normally." When she said she would use it, there was obviously a teasing look on her face. Lee Moran cursed, "You little bitch, you only know how to tease me. You know my situation." Dong. As Lee Moran said this, he pushed Yu Mengyang into the house and closed the door. The soundproof space of this big villa is very good. I can't hear their frolicking, but the situation Lee Moran mentioned. It's hard not to think too much about her situation. What could happen to her? After they entered the house, I just picked a room at random. In fact, the rooms downstairs are similar, well decorated, and all have sheets and quilts. I don't know why Lee Moran lives alone. Lying on the bed, I was still thinking about the situation Lee Moran mentioned. I really couldn't think of what would happen to a rich and capable woman like her. I didn't sleep all night, and soon I felt sleepy and fell asleep in a daze. I had another dream. But now the protagonist in the dream suddenly changed to Yu Mengyang. She was so coquettish in the dream, and she took the initiative to stick out her small buttocks for me. The pretty face that turned her head was delicate, just like a fairy. Suddenly I felt a pain in my waist, frowned, woke up, and opened my eyes and bumped into Yu Mengyang's pretty face. She supported the bed with her hands, knelt there, and stared at me. "Ah." I was startled and instinctively shrank back. "You. Mr. Yu, what were you doing?" I couldn't think of a name for her for a while, so I could only call her the way I called Lee Moran. "Little handsome boy, what did you dream about?" Yu Mengyang sat sideways, looking at me delicately. She was not wearing the skirt just now, but a gauze pajamas, which was faintly hazy. You can clearly see her fair skin inside. In addition, she was leaning sideways, with one hand on the bed, and her seductive look was even more seductive and hotter than the one I had dreamed of just now. I shivered and said, "No, nothing." "Nothing, what's wrong with you?" Yu Mengyang glanced at my crutch. I looked down and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was too high. I covered it with my hand in embarrassment. Seeing my look, Yu Menyang giggled and said, "Okay, don't press it. It's not good to break it later." Chapter 19. Seduced. She twisted her body as she spoke, half lying down to look at me, and her loose clothes were sagging and almost bursting. I couldn't control myself in the first place, and I couldn't bear to see her like this. I always felt that she was deliberately seducing me. I also felt it was unrealistic. She was a close friend of Lee Moran, and the clothes she wore were all branded. She would seduce me, a little loser who was labeled as a driver by Lee Moran. I believed that she was seducing me, and I believed that Lee Moran sent her to test me. But what was the reason for the test? I really couldn't figure it out. Seeing her twist her body again, she begged for mercy. "Mr. Yu, then can you go out for a while?" "What's the matter?" Yu Menyang smiled slightly, crawled over from the bed and approached me. "I'm not afraid of a woman, so why are you, a grown man, afraid that I will eat you?" Seeing her seductive look, I was afraid, really afraid, but I was embarrassed to say it. I smiled awkwardly and begged for mercy. "Mr. Yu, let's not joke, okay? Hee, little handsome boy, you are so cute." Yu Menyang took another step towards me. I was so scared that I shrank directly to the corner of the wall. It looked like she was about to kiss me, so I quickly turned my face away and closed my eyes to avoid looking at her. "Hey, little handsome boy, why is your thing not erect?" Yu Menyang suddenly shouted curiously. I opened my eyes and looked down, and it was indeed not erect. It would be strange if I could stand being scared by her. When I looked back and saw her charming and sexy body, I felt a surge of blood in my body. I hurriedly said, "Mr. Yu, no, Sister Yu, please stop teasing me, okay? If Mr. Lee sees me later, she will scold me to death." "Why are you afraid of her?" Yu Menyang blinked her big eyes and stared at me. Her eyes were sharp as if she wanted to see through me. "Afraid?" I nodded honestly. Actually, if I were to say I was afraid, I wouldn't really be afraid of Lee Moran. As long as I didn't make mistakes at work and as long as I respected her, I wouldn't be afraid of her even if she was indifferent to me. After all, I make a living by my ability, not by my face. Say I was afraid, but it was just to get rid of this little goblin as soon as possible. She was really too charming. The most important thing was that I didn't understand why she suddenly came to tease me. Yu Menyang seemed very satisfied with my answer. She took a step back, sat on the bed, crossed her legs, shook her sexy legs, stared at me and asked, "Handsome boy, have you ever thought about being with her?" "With her?" I frowned, thinking of the many times I dreamed of Lee Moran in my sleep, and swallowed my saliva. I didn't know who Yu Menyang was, so I didn't dare to say it. I shook my head and said, "I haven't thought about it." "Really?" Yu Menyang frowned and stared at me, obviously not believing what I said. "Handsome boy, you don't have to be afraid. I'll tell you secretly that Lee Moran looks like a cold CEO. He looks like he doesn't want strangers to come in every day, but is actually very coquettish behind the scenes." "Coquettish?" I looked at Yu Menyang in surprise. I don't believe that she would say this about Lee Moran when she has such a good relationship with him. Just when I heard her say that Lee Moran was coquettish, I immediately thought of the Big Tits Mom in the hookup app. If Lee Moran wasn't flirty, how could she play the hookup app? I got angry when I thought of this. Although she didn't show it on her face, Yu Menyang was too smart. She could tell when she saw me sluggish for a while and my facial muscles trembled. She saw that I didn't say anything, and her legs crossed and rubbed against my trouser legs. "Handsome boy, do you also find Lee Moran very flirty?" Chapter 20. Who is pretty? Just as I was about to speak, she teased me again. Who could bear being teased by a beautiful woman like this? I quickly shrank back. Seeing her half smile, my anger at Lee Moran for using the hookup app immediately disappeared. "Sister Yu, don't joke with me. Mr. Lee is my boss. How could I find out?" I begged her for mercy. "Really?" Yu Menyang smiled, stood up and sighed. "Alas, young man, I didn't expect you to be so loyal to Moran. Keep it up. Let's go." She walked out of the door and waved her little hand with her back to me. I didn't think she was really here to test me. I breathed a sigh of relief. I was just a little bit away from breaking my defense. No wonder some people say that the more beautiful a woman is, the more dangerous she is. I looked back at her walking out of the room, her swaying waist, her body swaying from side to side, and I shuddered all over. Fairy. Recalling the dream just now, I actually dreamed of her, and my whole body trembled again. I hurriedly shook my head, took out my phone to check the time, and found that it was almost 5 o'clock in the afternoon, so I hurriedly packed up and walked out. On the first floor, I didn't see anyone. Just when I wanted to look up at the second floor, I saw Lee Moran standing there. She glanced at me and said, "Go prepare the car, go out now." After she said that, she turned around and left. Yu Mingyang hid behind her and smiled at me coquettishly. I couldn't help but frown. Lee Moran really thought of me as a driver. Alas. Although I was unwilling, I thought that I still had to rely on Lee Moran for food, so I sighed helplessly and went to drive. In fact, the car was parked in front of the villa yard. There was nothing to prepare. I just walked over and sat in the driving seat first and started the car. I thought they would come out soon. I waited for almost half an hour and I was getting impatient. I was about to go in and urge them. I saw Yu Mingyang and Lee Moran both come out. They changed their clothes. Lee Moran changed the school uniform I bought for her into a light blue suspender skirt, which looked dignified and elegant, yet charming. Yu Mingyang didn't wear a skirt, but a pair of tight jeans and a white t-shirt. She didn't look as charming as she was in a skirt just now. She looked sexy like she was in pajamas when she ran into my room, but she looked more sunny. Both of them were born with a good figure and they look good in anything. They can wear clothes to bring out the most beautiful taste. Seeing them approaching, I turned around in a hurry and didn't notice them. Who knew that as soon as Yu Mingyang got in the car, she shouted to me, "Little handsome boy, who is prettier, me or Moran?" I couldn't help but turn my head and take a look. I happened to bump into Lee Moran getting on the bus, and our eyes met, and her eyebrows suddenly frowned. I hurriedly turned around, pretending not to hear Yu Mingyang's question. When Yu Mingyang saw that I ignored her, she snorted and said, "Little handsome boy, why are you ignoring me?" "Ah." I pretended to be surprised and shouted, "What did you say?" I said, "Who is prettier between me and Moran?" Yu Mingyang stood up in the middle, grabbed the gap between the two front seats, and stuck her head out to shout in my ear. I knew I couldn't run away, so I hesitated for a long time and looked back at Lee Moran. When Lee Moran saw me looking at her, her eyebrows frowned and said impatiently, "Who do you think is prettier? Just say who is prettier. Why are you looking at me?" This question is a fatal question. Saying one of them is prettier will offend the other. One is my immediate boss and the other is a good-looking girlfriend. I will not get any good results if I offend either of them. Besides, both of them are among the top beauties, so it's really hard to tell who is prettier. Chapter 21 Accident in the Elevator. After taking a look, I thought that work was more important, so I took a deep breath and said, "Mr. Lee, you are beautiful." "Oh, do you mean I am not beautiful anymore?" As soon as I finished speaking, Yu Mingyang became unhappy, snorted, and reached out to slap me. I hurriedly explained, "Mr. Yu, I didn't mean that, I just adjust." After a long time of talking, I still couldn't figure it out. "Okay, Mingyang, stop teasing her." Fortunately, Lee Moran pulled her back to her seat. I breathed a sigh of relief and glanced at her from the rearview mirror. She snorted at me arrogantly and glared at me, as if to say, "You wait for me." I instantly felt a chill on my back, and I didn't dare to say a word, so I drove out in a hurry. I drove out of the community and subconsciously glanced at Lee Moran. After all, I praised her beauty and wanted to know what her expression would be, but unfortunately, she looked calm and had no expression at all. I was disappointed and just wanted to ask them where they were going. I bumped into Yu Mingyang's eyes staring at me in the rearview mirror. She giggled, "Little handsome boy, why are you staring at Murin? How about I drive and you sit in the back seat and watch slowly?" "Ah." I exclaimed and glanced at Lee Moran and hurriedly explained, "I didn't look at it, I just wanted to ask where we were going." "Red Rose Western Restaurant," Lee Moran said to me lightly. Her expression remained unchanged, and her deep eyes under her long eyelashes turned slightly, giving people a mysterious and cold feeling. No one could see what she was thinking. "Oh," I responded and hurriedly retracted my eyes. Yu Mingyang giggled and said, "Little handsome boy, if you want to see it, just say so. Why are you looking for so many excuses? I can drive, too." She raised her hips again and went to the center console. "Mingyang, come on, stop teasing him, let him drive properly." Lee Moran held her back. "Okay. Little handsome boy, I'll let you go for now." Yu Mingyang giggled and sat back in her seat. I knew Yu Mingyang did it on purpose. It was revenge for me not saying she was beautiful just now. She was scheming. This kind of woman is too scheming. You must stay away from her. It's a happy thing to have a beautiful woman who is passionate about you. But I know I can't play with a woman like you, Meng Yang, so it's better to stay away from her. The more I want to stay away from her, the more she wants to get close to me. I just drove the car to the basement parking lot of the Red Rose Western restaurant. Because the parking space is relatively small, I let them get off first and I reversed into the garage to park. I just parked the car and wanted to roll up the window. Yu Mengyang suddenly appeared like a ghost, lying on the car window, looking at me tenderly. I was startled. What are you doing? It's okay, come and see if you have parked the car. She smiled at me and jumped to chase Lee Moran. Fairy. Seeing her enchanting figure, I took a deep breath, parked the car and got out. I opened the car door and was stunned. Lee Moran invited Yu Mengyang to dinner and she asked me to be the driver. Should I go up to eat? Did she reserve a seat for me? Red Rose Restaurant is one of the top Western restaurants in Jinghai. You can't eat there without a reservation. If Lee Moran didn't reserve a seat for me, I would go up with them rashly. Not only would I lose face, but I would also lose face for Lee Moran later. I'm afraid I won't have a good time. Lin Yi, what are you doing? Just as I was hesitating, Lee Moran, who had walked to the elevator entrance, turned around and shouted at me impatiently. When I heard Lee Moran calling me, I was delighted and hurriedly responded, I'm coming. I ran over quickly. The elevator was just coming down and I followed them into the elevator. There were only 3 of us in the elevator and we could clearly smell the charming fragrance on them. That fragrance was not comparable to that of inferior perfume, but was full of a diffuse scent. It smelled refreshing. But I didn't dare to get too close to them, so I shrank to the corner of the elevator and tried to keep the farthest distance from them. Lee Moran didn't care about me at all. She stood in front of the elevator door, looking up at the numbers on the elevator that kept jumping up. Yu Mengyang took Lee Moran's arm, turned her head and giggled at me, little handsome boy, why didn't you come over just now? Do you think that you, Mr. Lee, are so stingy that you won't let you go to eat? I don't think so. I glared at Yu Mengyang in annoyance. This devil always brings up things that are not related to the topic. If I ask, as long as my answer is slightly biased, I will offend Lee Moran. She never thinks that she is Lee Moran's best friend, she may not care, but I rely on Lee Moran for my livelihood. If I offend Lee Moran, I will not have a good end. Really? Yu Mengyang pursed her lips and smiled softly, and I knew she would say something again when I saw her charming eyes. Fortunately, at this moment, the elevator reached the first floor and someone came in. Yu Mengyang shut up and didn't say anything. She and Lee Moran both took a step back in my direction. I leaned against the wall and there was no place for me to move. I could only shrink my body. There were not many people at the door, so I shouldn't be squeezed in. Wait. Who would have thought that when the elevator door was about to close, someone outside suddenly shouted, a strong man stretched out his hand to block the elevator door, and 7 or 8 men squeezed in directly. No. No, I want to go down. Lee Moran panicked. Moran. Yu Mengyang was also startled. Hurry up to protect Lee Moran. I glanced at them and saw that there was still some space, not overloaded and could sit. No. Don't. Lee Moran shook her head, her body trembling constantly, her face turned very pale. Moran, it's okay, I'm here. Yu Mengyang protected Lee Moran and kept comforting Lee Moran. I saw Lee Moran in such a state and didn't understand what was wrong. Just then, the elevator started, the whole elevator shook, and everyone who squeezed in leaned back a step. The people standing in front pressed back. Ah! Yu Mengyang cried out and shouted, everyone move out, what are you squeezing for? The people in front turned around and glanced at Yu Mengyang. Everyone looked at her moving figure, not moving out, but deliberately squeezed in. There was also a young man in his early 30s who looked very decent in a suit and said helplessly, Beauty, I'm sorry, it's too crowded. No. No, I want to go out, go out. Lee Moran's face turned even paler and his whole body trembled even more. I saw that although Yu Mengyang had been protecting Lee Moran, she couldn't protect him alone, so I frowned, squeezed out from the corner of the elevator and squeezed up to push those people away. I didn't expect that as soon as I got up, the people next to me squeezed and I actually rushed towards Lee Moran. Lee Moran happened to be squeezed to the wall and I rushed over and kissed Lee Moran's little mouth directly. Chapter 22. It's over. Lee Moran's little mouth is very sexy, with clear lines, full and rosy, just like 2 dewy petals, kissing with a hint of softness and fullness. Gulp, I swallowed hard and saw her staring at me with wide eyes. I was startled and stretched out my hand to squeeze back with the help of the elevator wall. The person behind me squeezed me again, and I stumbled. My whole body was directly pressed against Lee Moran. Lee Moran was also pressed tightly against the elevator wall by me. Lee Moran moaned, and her hazy face was full of seductive breath. The fullness of her chest pressed tightly against me, and the elastic and soft feeling spread throughout my body. In an instant, I was intoxicated and pressed against her legs. I secretly had a bad premonition. Sure enough, the next second, the instinctive reaction of my body made me, a little virgin, unable to bear it, and pressed on Lee Moran's legs. Maybe she didn't know what it was. I thought with relief, tilted my head back, and left Lee Moran's red lips. When I was disappointed, I saw Lee Moran's pale face immediately turned red, with a hint of shyness. "I'll settle the score with you later." She bit her lip and snorted at me. I smiled bitterly and turned around to see Yu Mengyang looking at me and Lee Moran in astonishment. Lee Moran turned her head to look at Yu Mengyang, and her pretty face became even redder. "Moran, you're..." Yu Mengyang was about to say something. Lee Moran leaned towards her. "Mengyang, don't talk nonsense." It was obvious that she was hiding something from me. I frowned and looked at the two of them in confusion. Red Rose Western Restaurant is on the top floor of this building. As the elevator went up, the people in the elevator slowly went down, and the space in the entire elevator was slowly vacated. I saw the space coming out, and hurriedly walked to the other end, standing there without daring to move, staring at the numbers on the elevator with my head raised and shaking my legs to cover up my inner nervousness. I didn't notice it when I reached the top floor, and I didn't pay attention. After Lee Moran left, Yu Mengyang turned around and shouted at me, "Hey! What are you doing?" "Ah!" I screamed, not daring to look at Yu Mengyang, and lowered my head to go out. Yu Mengyang looked back at Lee Moran, who had walked into the restaurant first, pushed me, blocked me in the elevator, and looked at me with a charming smile. "Okay, you just kissed Lee Moran and pushed against her. How can you not feel comfortable?" "I didn't," I explained hurriedly. Yu Mengyang snorted and said, "Do you really think I'm blind? You think I didn't see you? You not only kissed me, but also..." She glanced at my crotch. I was crying and didn't know how to explain. Seeing Yu Mengyang smirk, I was afraid that she would be too nervous to mention it in front of Lee Moran during dinner later, so I begged, "Mr. Yu, it was just an accident, please be kind and don't tease me, okay?" Begged me. Yu Mengyang stared at me with interest and smiled. I really didn't know what she was going to do. I put my palms together and bowed to her, saying, "Yes, yes, I beg you, okay. Let's go out quickly, don't block the elevator and affect others." "What if I affect others?" She pouted, leaned against the elevator door, stared at me and said, "If you really want to beg me, don't say anything nonsense later." "Yes, please." I was really tormented by her and cried. I don't know why she likes to tease me so much. Is it fun to tease me? Hee, then tell me if you feel comfortable pressing against Moran's legs just now. She glanced at the side and approached me and said, "Ah." I exclaimed, looking at her staring at me seriously, knowing that if I didn't tell her, she would never let me go with her personality, so I nodded with a sad face, "Comfortable. Then do you still want to press against it?" Yu Mengyang stared at me with a smile. When I heard it, I recalled the feeling just now and swallowed hard. "Mengyang, what are you doing?" Just as I was about to answer, Lee Moran, who had walked into the Western restaurant, suddenly turned around and shouted, "Oh, I'm here." Yu Mengyang responded, smiled meaningfully at me, and turned away. I was relieved when I saw her leave. Walking out of the elevator, I saw the entrance door of the Western restaurant, which was just a few meters away from the elevator. If Lee Moran had been at the door just now, then she must have known what I said to Yu Mengyang. She hated me to death because of a dream. She was drunk, and I kissed her completely unintentionally, and she slapped me. I kissed her again this time, and damn, she reacted uncontrollably. She must have felt my reaction. Will she think I'm a pervert or something? It's over, it's over. I don't even dare to go in and have dinner with her. I thought it would be better to just run away, but where can I run to? I'm still working for her. I can run away from the monk, but not the temple. Besides, I can't run away. My sister's daily hospitalization expenses can only be maintained by keeping this job. The 300,000 medical expenses also depend on whether the design designed by Lu Qiaoqian this time can be sold all over the world. That way I can get a bonus. Even if it's not enough to pay for my sister's medical expenses, it shouldn't be much different if I scrape together a little. No matter, we've kissed each other, it's not the first time anyway. At most, I can slap her a few more times. As for the reaction, I pressed her thigh. She is a woman who often plays hookup apps, and she has been pressed before. I took a deep breath and strode into the Western restaurant. The Red Rose Western Restaurant is the top Western restaurant in Shanghai. Those who can come here are probably rich or noble. I can't be like a country bumpkin going to the city. That would be embarrassing for myself and Lee Moran. High-end restaurants have their own advantages. As soon as you walk in, all the beautiful waiters with rabbit ears bow to you, "Sir, good evening." Then a young man in a suit comes up and bows to you, "Sir, do you have a reservation?" "Oh, I have." I smiled and looked at the hall. I didn't find Lee Moran and Yu Mengyang. Seeing that the young man in the suit was about to ask, I immediately asked him, "Where are the two beauties who just came in?" "I'm with them." "So they are Mr. Mo's friends?" "They are in the private room upstairs." "Please come this way." The waiter in the suit immediately led the way in front. I followed him and thought something was wrong. Lee Moran's last name is Lee, and Yu Mengyang's last name is Yu. No matter which of them booked the table, it was not Mr. Mo. After arriving at the private room, I learned that this Ms. Mo was the proprietress of the Red Rose Western Restaurant and one of Lee Moran's best friends. As soon as I entered the room, I thought I saw her, and my eyes suddenly lit up. Under her high pile hair, her beautiful oval face, deep eyes, and plump red lips gave people a kind and gentle feeling at first glance, just like a girl next door. I felt my heart beat instantly. "Moran, is this your driver?" She saw me and said softly to Lee Moran. The voice was soft and long, as if whispering in your ear, and my whole body was numb. Lee Moran heard her words and glanced back at me. I quickly retracted my gaze and shouted, "Mr. Lee." Chapter 23. A love rival has arrived. She glanced at me and said, "Sit down, what are you standing there for?" "Oh." I responded, looked at the reserved seat and went to sit down, just opposite Mo Xiaoxiao. Lee Moran and Yu Mengyang sat on both sides of me. I am a man eating Western food with three top beauties. Anyone would be envious and jealous, but unfortunately I don't have much sense of happiness. The female boss on the left is the breadwinner, and the one on the right is a goblin who always likes to play tricks on people and expose you from time to time to frame you. Across from me, I secretly glanced at Mo Xiaoxiao. She happened to be looking at me, and our eyes met. She smiled at me, and I was so scared that I quickly lowered my head. But her gentle smile was engraved in my mind. She smiled, and the corners of her mouth slightly curved. "You are perfect and there is no flaw to pick out. The most important thing is to give people a kind and amiable feeling, which makes people's hearts melt at that moment." Her smile echoed in my mind for a long time, and then a word came to my mind, a good wife and a good mother. Yes, she is such a woman. If I want to find a wife in the future, I must find a woman like her, but when this idea came up, I looked back at Lee Moran and felt that I had let Lee Moran down. Looking at Lee Moran a few more times, I saw her chatting with Mo Xiaoxiao and Yu Mengyang, with a faint smile on her lips. In fact, I still feel that Lee Moran is the best. I am most familiar with her anyway. "Xiaoxiao, is Yanchuan not here yet?" After they talked about their feelings for a while, Lee Moran suddenly asked Mo Xiaoxiao. "Yanchuan?" I frowned and noticed that there was a set of tableware next to Mo Xiaoxiao's seat. Mo Xiaoxiao pursed her lips and smiled slightly. "Oh, it should be here soon, I'll call and ask." She just picked up the phone. The door of the box was pushed open, and a handsome middle-aged man in an expensive suit walked in. He politely extended his hand and greeted, "Sorry, I'm late." "Oh. Moran, Mengyang, long time no see." He waved to Lee Moran and Yu Mengyang. Then he walked to Mo Xiaoxiao's side, leaned over and kissed Mo Xiaoxiao. Mo Xiaoxiao cooperated and raised her head, letting him kiss her. Such beautiful, sexy, and beautiful lips when she smiled were kissed. I looked up and glanced at him. He just stood up and looked at me. I frowned and said, "Hey, this is..." "Oh, Moran's driver." Before Lee Moran answered, Yu Mengyang helped to explain. When I heard the driver, I got angry. I stared at the middle-aged man who stood up and was about to explain. Lee Moran turned her head and looked at me. I saw that she didn't want to explain to me. I smiled embarrassedly and sat down. "Driver." The middle-aged man sneered and stopped paying attention to me. He moved the chair and sat down next to Mo Xiaoxiao. He came, and steak and other Western food followed, as if he was the guest of honor. The four of them talked and laughed while eating, making me a complete outsider. The top-grade steak didn't taste good in my mouth. After eating a few bites, I stood up and said, "Mr. Lee, I'm full. I'll wait for you in the car." I deliberately emphasized the tone of "in the car" and swore that I was dissatisfied with her defining me as a driver. After saying that, I didn't wait for her response and directly opened the door and walked out. Before the door was closed, I heard the middle-aged man smiling and saying to Lee Moran, "Moran, you are really good. The driver can even let him come to the table to eat together." When I heard him say this, I really wanted to go in and fuck him. But when I think about it, Mo Xiaoxiao is the owner of this restaurant, and he is Mo Xiaoxiao's husband, and he is also a friend of Lee Moran, Yu Mengyang and others. His status must be not simple. In fact, just by his expensive clothes, you can see that he is richer than me. And what about me? I am just a person who can't pay for my sister's medical expenses. I can come to the top Western restaurant like Red Rose to eat. It can be said that I can only eat with Lee Moran's pity. Driver, fuck, whoever you want to be. I went downstairs to the car, opened the door and threw the seat on the door. What made me angry was that Lee Moran knew that I was not a driver, but he didn't explain to me. I didn't look down on the profession of driver, but I really wasn't a driver. I dare not say that I am a top designer in the world, but I am a designer who has designed many best-selling underwear for Hui Mai company. Lee Moran treated me as a driver, which is simply a waste of talent. And he said it in front of an outsider. The more I thought about it, the more annoyed I was. Fuck, I cursed again and hit the steering wheel. Little handsome boy, why are you so angry? Just after I smashed it, Yu Mengyang appeared next to me like a ghost, which frightened me. Seeing her standing there with a wicked smile, I said impatiently, "Hey, Mr. Yu, you two haven't seen each other for so long, why don't you have a good chat? Why did you run down here?" "Because I'm worried about you." Yu Mengyang giggled at me. I was really impressed by her and begged for mercy, "Miss, please let me go. I am just a worker under your best friend. Why do you always tease me? Did I tease you?" Yu Mengyang narrowed her eyes, opened the car door, leaned towards me, and smiled with slightly narrowed eyes, "Little handsome boy, can't you change your mind? Do you think it is possible that I fell in love with you at first sight and want to pursue you?" "Ah." I was startled and glanced at her. She was still leaning on the roof of the car with her hands and her head on her arms. I sat and looked at her, and my sight just fell on her big breasts. Her posture made the already proud place more firm and more attractive. Don't say I don't believe that a woman like Yu Mengyang would fall in love with me. I think it's just a lie in TV dramas to fall in love at first sight. When a man sees a woman and says he falls in love at first sight, it's nothing more than seeing a beautiful woman, his heart is moved, and he wants to sleep with her. I believe in love at first sight, but women really don't believe it. I glanced at her seductive posture and really regretted not closing the car door in time. Now she was blocking the way and I couldn't get out of the car. Besides, the fragrance on her body exuded an alluring breath. Who can resist such a demon as her? I took a deep breath and begged her again, "Auntie, please forgive me. I would rather believe that a sow can fly than believe that you will fall in love with me at first sight. Why don't you have confidence in yourself? Or do you think I am Mo Rant's best friend and you dare not fall in love with me?" Yu Mengyang twisted her body as she said this. I really couldn't stand it anymore and said with a sad face, "I dare not, I don't dare, can you go away first?" "What's the matter? Are you up again?" Yu Mengyang smiled and glanced at my crutch. "Auntie, how can you be more reserved? You are a woman." I was really going to collapse. I didn't expect her to be so open and bold. Chapter 24 Caught with a Handle. I know I'm a woman. Yu Mengyang chuckled and slid her hand along her perfect curve. Why don't I look like a woman yet? I found that I really couldn't talk to her and finally understood what it meant to talk to each other. "Ah." I sighed and said, "Mr. Yu, let's stop playing, okay? If you have anything to say, just say it directly." I really couldn't stand it. I couldn't talk to her, and the most fatal thing was that her body twisted with invisible temptations. Who could resist it? "Then you said I'm prettier than Moran." Yu Mengyang pouted. I was speechless. I didn't expect her to hold a grudge like this. If I had known this when she asked me these questions, I would have directly said that she was beautiful, even if it offended Lee Moran. I believe Lee Moran would not hold a grudge for this. But thinking about it, it was also very dangerous. Lee Moran could blame me for a dream, and she must not be a generous woman. I felt my whole body was getting hot. I took a breath and said directly, "Boss, you are the most beautiful. You are the most beautiful in the world. You have a good figure and big breasts." Breasts. Yu Mengyang was stunned, glared at me and said, you are lying with your eyes open. How can mine be as big as Moran's? They are not small. I just wanted to perfunctorily tell her, but I didn't know that I said it too quickly and said this as well. Her breasts are really not as big as Lee Moran's. I think you are teasing me. Yu Mengyang glared at me. No, really not. I hurriedly explained, in fact, you also know that Lee Moran is my boss. In front of her, I still have to lick her. In fact, in my heart, I always think you are beautiful, but I dare not say it. Really? Really? I looked at her with the most sincere eyes. Yu Mengyang looked at me and smiled. Okay, I'll trust you for once. Anyway, I've recorded it, ha. What recording? I was startled. I looked and saw that Yu Mengyang was holding a mobile phone with the recording on the screen. I was about to cry and yelled, "Sister Yu, can we not play like this?" As she spoke, she stretched out her hand to grab the phone in her hand when she was not prepared. Yu Mengyang had seen through my purpose long ago. She retracted her hand and took a step back. She twisted her waist towards me proudly and said, "Hey, you still want to grab it? Give it to me." I was anxious to grab it. She hid back. If it was just that she was prettier than Lee Moran, it wouldn't matter. The most important thing was what I said about breasts just now. Lee Moran hated me because of men, which was more or less related to this aspect. If she heard about breasts, she would hate me even more, so I had to let Yu Mengyang delete it. Leaving it in her hands would be a time bomb. Who knows, she might play the recording when we three are having dinner or doing something together one day. If it's just the three of us, it's better. If it's played by a group of people, or in the company, I really don't know where to bury my head. The more I see her smug look, the more scared I am. It's actually quite easy for a grown man like me to chase her and snatch her phone, but there is a difference between men and women. I'm afraid that if I touch her other parts, she will do something naughty with me later, and I'll go to Lee Moran to complain. I was so reserved that I couldn't snatch it. Hee, you can't snatch it. She looked at me, who was furious, twisting her waist proudly. She looked charming and naughty, and I was angry and helpless. I won't snatch it anymore. I waved my hand, pretending to give up, and shook my head to get back to the car. She frowned. I won't snatch it anymore. I ignored her. Oh, boring. She sighed, walked over, and also walked towards the car. I saw her reaching for the car door, with her other hand hanging over there. It was a good opportunity. I took a deep breath and quickly reached out to grab the phone in her hand. Ah! She cried out softly and held the phone tightly. I grabbed the phone, but couldn't pull it out. Instead, she pulled it hard. My center of gravity was unstable, and I suddenly rushed towards her. Ah! She cried out again, and her body fell directly on the back seat, and her body fell down, with her legs bent and still outside. And I was led by her to rush over. My chest softened, and my whole body pressed against her. Although I didn't kiss her little mouth so coincidentally, my face was pressed against her cheek, and our faces were close together. The most important thing is that her legs are outside. I press on her, that posture, that position. She whimpered when I pressed her, and her legs moved. As a novice, I have never experienced such stimulation before, and I felt it instantly. I was so scared that I just wanted to support myself and get up. She suddenly raised her legs and wrapped them around me, and at the same time stretched out her hand to hook my neck, so that I couldn't get up. "What are you doing?" I frowned and turned my face away quickly, not daring to look at her. She pulled my neck and pulled me back, making me stare at her. "Why are you pressing on me? Aren't you uncomfortable?" She smiled slightly. I immediately cried. Of course, it's comfortable to be pressed, but it's also uncomfortable. If you feel uncomfortable, you will want to move. Indeed, I moved instinctively. "Well." She hummed immediately, tilted her head back slightly, and said in a tender voice, "It's comfortable, keep going, I'll make you feel good." "You're a pervert." I was frightened by her, and quickly broke free from her hand and got up. Unfortunately, after breaking free, her legs were still entangled. I stood up, and she hooked her legs, and I pushed her again. "Well." She moaned again, lying there looking at me and smiling. "Why, do you still want me to take off my pants?" I was completely out of temper because of her. I was afraid that Lee Moran would come down suddenly, and I was even more afraid that someone would pass by. I looked around and was relieved to see that there was no one around. I turned back and begged for mercy. Auntie, I beg you, don't play with me, okay? Hee hee. She smiled happily and let me go. I felt relieved and a little disappointed. In fact, even if there was a pair of pants between us, pressing on her would still be infinitely tempting. If I could really hug her, it would seem to be very pleasant. I regretted it a little. She let go of me, put her legs together, and sat directly in the car, leaning over and reaching for the rearview mirror in the car. I looked at her, frowned and asked, "What are you doing?" Moran's car has full vehicle surveillance. I took out the memory card and saw if it was recorded just now. She replied casually, "It should be." I took a look and felt that such a good car had it. I reacted, I exclaimed, and immediately climbed up and shouted, "Auntie, don't mess around, okay? It was just an accident, you made me miserable enough, don't torment me anymore, okay?" I reached out to grab it, but she had already taken it, turned around and sat down by the car door, looked at me and smiled. "How could I torment you? You took advantage of me. You provoked me." I glared at her angrily. She frowned, pouted her lips and pretended to be wronged. "Oh, you are still rude to me, humph, I will tell Moran that you bullied me." When I saw her pulling the car door, I was frightened and hurriedly grabbed her. "Auntie, I was wrong, please stop making trouble, okay? You tell me, I am willing to do anything you want me to do." She seemed to be waiting for me to say this, and turned her eyes to stare at me. "Really?" Chapter 25 Found the donor of my sister. Looking at her big eyes that blinked, I couldn't help laughing and said, "Really, tell me what you want me to do." Hee hee. She smiled and suddenly became interested. She sat up straight and said to me, "Get in and close the door." "What for?" I frowned. Although I was reluctant, she had a recording and a video in her hand, so I had to accommodate her, get in the car, and close the door. As soon as I got in, I saw her twisting her buttocks and looking at me sideways. I couldn't help but frown, thinking that she might have some special fetish, or she really liked me. As the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together. Lee Moran even uses hookup apps, so her bestie may not be much better. I dare not think about those things, because our social status is too different. If she is really a fickle woman, she might really like me. Besides, I have heard that some rich people have special fetishes. Maybe Yu Menyang has such a fetish, likes to seduce people, or likes to do those sports in the car. I looked up and down at Yu Menyang's charming and sexy body, swallowed my saliva suddenly, and felt itchy. "Lin Yi, what are you thinking about?" Yu Menyang frowned and patted me with her hand. I was startled and looked around and said, "Oh, nothing, I just thought it would be a little inconvenient in the car. If someone came over, or if Lee Moran came down, it would be bad if he found out." "What's wrong?" Yu Menyang asked me, guessing my thoughts, stretched out her hand and pinched my arm and scolded, "What are you thinking about? Do you think I want to have sex in the car with you? Isn't it?" I touched the place where she pinched, and it really hurt. "What are you thinking about?" She snorted, turned around proudly, and turned her back to me. I scratched my head awkwardly. "Then what do you want to talk to me about?" She ignored me, sat with her back to me for a while, and suddenly turned back to me and said, "Lin Yi, do you really want to have sex with me?" I was stunned and saw her staring at me. I shook my head first and then looked at her graceful figure and nodded violently. Generally, women will get angry when they hear men say this. She giggled, "I can give it to you, but can you do me a favor first?" "Yes." I was completely attracted by her and answered without thinking. "Then can you help me pick up Lee Moran?" She smiled charmingly and reached out to grab my hand. I nodded, yes. "Okay, it's settled then." Yu Menyang clapped her hands and pointed at me and said, "Lin Yi, you promised, don't regret it." Looking at her serious look, I shrank my eyebrows and then I suddenly realized it and shouted at her in astonishment, "What do you mean you promised? I didn't agree. You asked me to pick up Lee Moran, aren't you trying to kill me?" "No." Seeing my nervous look, Yu Menyang giggled and said, "You are so handsome, and Moran is a woman, you may be able to get her if you chase her. Besides, don't you like Lee Moran? Don't you want to fuck her?" Yu Menyang reached out and touched my leg. I shuddered all over, and the image of Lee Moran appeared in my mind, and I couldn't help swallowing. I dare say that with Lee Moran's figure and appearance, anyone who is not a eunuch will have thoughts about her. Plus Yu Menyang said it so rudely, just using fuck. How could I not have some fluctuations in my heart? Yu Menyang looked at me and knew that I was moved. Her tender hands scratched my legs again. "Besides, it was me who asked you to chase Lee Moran, so I will naturally help you. Before you get Lee Moran, I will help you." You help me. I was teased by her, took a breath, and stuttered, Moran is not your best friend, why do you want me to chase her? This. She took a deep breath, and when she gave you enough expectations, she suddenly turned around and smiled, this is a secret, I won't tell you. I was already full of appetite, and she didn't say it, that kind of anger. Forget it, don't expect me to help you. I was angry and opened the car door to get out. When she saw me get out of the car, she said coquettishly, why aren't you afraid that I will tell Moran about the recording and video just now? You can talk if you want. I didn't care and snorted. In fact, it's not that I really don't care, but compared to her asking me to pursue Lee Moran, after weighing the pros and cons, I think that if she showed Lee Moran the video and recording, at most I would be scolded by Lee Moran. I make a living by my ability and craftsmanship, I don't need to rely on anyone's thighs. The worst thing is that Lee Moran will be more indifferent to me in the future. But if I pursue Lee Moran and blaspheme her, she might really fire me. Lee Moran's beauty and figure are what everyone wants, but not everyone can want. Hey. Are you really not afraid? Yu Mengyang chased me out of the car and called me. I don't care about her. I can't afford to offend her, but I can't hide from her. Lee Moran is my boss's wife, I can't do anything about it. She is just a best friend. She can serve whoever she wants. I was angry and wanted to go out and wait for them. After taking a few steps, my cell phone rang suddenly. It was Aunt Chen from the hospital who called to tell me that Lin Min's donor had been found and I needed to pay 300,000 yuan for medical expenses immediately. I waited for nearly 2 years for a donor, but there was no result. I didn't expect it to be so sudden. I said excitedly, okay, Aunt Chen, I'll go there right away. After hanging up the phone, I frowned again when I thought of the medical expenses. I hesitated and thought about going to the hospital first. I took the key and saw Yu Mengyang still staring at me. I turned around and said, Mr. Yu, I have something urgent to do in the hospital. Here are the keys. Can you help me give them to Mr. Lee later? No. Yu Mengyang pouted her lips. She was so willful that she was obviously still angry with me. I was really anxious, so I threw the keys into the car and said to her, Mr. Yu, I'm sorry to bother you. I have something urgent to do and I'm leaving first. After that, I ran out of the parking lot. With a donor, my sister's illness can be cured and she won't have to suffer from the pain. How can I not be excited? On the way to the taxi, I frowned and thought about all the ways to get money and borrow money. Unfortunately, I have borrowed a lot for Lin Min's hospitalization in the past 2 years and I haven't paid it back yet. I really don't know who to borrow from. I can only think of the hospital. Because of the donor, my sister's condition has worsened. The doctor suggested arranging the operation as soon as possible. Before I arrived at the ward, I saw several doctors talking to Aunt Chen. I walked over and heard a few words, urging Aunt Chen to pay the operation fee. Aunt Chen obviously couldn't afford the money and was begging them. When she saw me, her eyes lit up and she shouted, Xiao Yi, you're here. The doctor said that the surgery needs to be done right away. The total cost is 350,000 yuan. What? I glared. I didn't expect that it would increase by another 50,000 yuan. Chapter 26 Who helped pay the surgery fee? I took a deep breath and turned to comfort Aunt Chen. Aunt Chen, it's okay. I will find a way to pay the money. You go in first. Looking at her tearful appearance, I knew that Aunt Chen must have said a lot of good things to these doctors just now. I helped her walk into the ward, turned back to the attending doctor, scratched my head awkwardly and said, Director Miao, can you see if you can help my sister with the surgery first? Give me the time for the surgery fee. Give me 3 days. Do you think it's okay? No. Without waiting for me to explain too much, the attending doctor directly rejected me. An intern doctor next to her snorted, alas. You can't even get the surgery fee together, why bother to treat the disease? Go back and wait to die. What did you say? I was annoyed, and when I heard his words, I became anxious and glared at him and shouted, What do you mean by go back and wait to die? Am I not trying to raise the medical expenses now? Then you raise them. The intern doctor sneered and turned to the attending doctor and said, Director, you can't pay the medical expenses at first glance. There is just another patient waiting for a kidney source. Look. I became anxious when I heard his words and hurriedly grabbed the attending doctor, Director Miao, 1 day, can you give me 1 day? Lin Minute has been hospitalized here for almost 2 years. Director Meow has always been the attending doctor, so I naturally know her. She frowned slightly, looked at me and said, Lin Yi, I have already informed you that you must prepare the surgery fee first. After all, you know how scarce kidney sources are. If you can't pay the surgery fee, I can only arrange it for the next patient first. No, 1 day, Director Meow, can you just give me 1 day? I almost knelt down to her, holding her hand and begging, just give me 1 day, I will definitely get the surgery fee together. Speaking of knowing Director Meow for such a long time, she has always been wearing a mask and a hat, and I don't know what she looks like. Plus, she was wearing a loose white coat, and her figure could not be seen. From the bulge on her chest, it can be confirmed that her breasts are definitely not small. As she was hesitating, the intern next to her interrupted and said, Director Meow, this is not in line with the rules. The kidney source is in place. If you can't pay the surgery fee, you have to go to the next patient. Is it you who decides or me? Director Meow glared at him, took a deep breath and turned to me and said, Lin Yi, I can't give you a day, so let's do it tonight. Before work at 8 o'clock tomorrow, if you still can't get the surgery fee together, we can only follow the hospital's rules and arrange the kidney source for the next patient. I looked at the time. It was less than 20 hours away from 8 o'clock tomorrow. I gritted my teeth and said, okay, 8 o'clock tomorrow. Before leaving, I looked at the intern. I felt that he was quite strange. After all, I was not familiar with him. Why did he target me? I still felt good when he was scolded by Director Meow. But now the more headache is the surgery fee. 300,000 has become 350,000. I took a deep breath and walked into the ward. Aunt Chen, who was lying beside the bed, stood up when she saw me. I saw that Lin Minute had fallen asleep, so I sighed. Then she walked out. Aunt Chen knew what I meant, looked at Lin Minute, and followed me out of the ward. Aunt Chen, I will find a way to pay for the surgery. Don't worry about it, okay? I looked at Aunt Chen, who looked haggard, and I didn't know why I felt an inexplicable pain in my heart. A person with no relatives and no friends, who gets you a salary of 2,000 or 3,000 a month, has been taking care of Lin Minute meticulously. Xiao Yi, don't be too tired. Aunt Chen reached out and touched my forehead distressedly. I suddenly felt my old face blush and took a step back. After all, Aunt Chen didn't look old, she looked like she was in her early 30s. It was just that she looked haggard these days taking care of Lin Minute, which made her pretty face lose a lot of luster, but it did not affect her proud figure. Even though she always wears simple clothes, she still makes people shine when she twists and turns. Aunt Chen, I'll go to raise medical expenses first. I said nervously, turned my head away quickly, and didn't dare to see Aunt Chen again. I was still nervous when I walked out of the hospital. Aunt Chen's gentleness just now really shocked me. I took a deep breath, calmed my mind, and worried about the surgery fee. I took out my mobile phone address book and almost tore it apart. I didn't know who to call to borrow money. Who can lend me 350,000? After flipping over and over, I finally opened Lee Moran's number interface. It seemed that she was the only one. For my sister, I took a deep breath and dialed Lee Moran's number. The call was connected after a while. I'm very busy now, don't disturb me. Lee Moran snorted and hung up directly. Before the phone went silent, I clearly felt her moan. Busy, what is she busy with now? Did he go to hook up again? I gritted my teeth in anger and kicked the trash can next to me. I felt that I couldn't wait for Lee Moran any longer. After all, the hospital would not give me a chance. I shamelessly started to look through the address book and called one by one. As long as I was familiar with them, I would not let go of any of them. Unfortunately, I called more than a dozen people in a row, but the harvest was very few. I borrowed less than 10,000 yuan. The most ridiculous thing was that I called a few more people later and was scolded. Seeing that I had almost looked through the address book, I was really desperate. Sitting at the door of the hospital, I grabbed my hair in annoyance. Suddenly, my cell phone rang. I picked it up excitedly and thought that Lee Moran had replied to me after finishing his work, but I found that it was Director Meow who called. I frowned and answered the phone. Mr. Lin, I just arranged it and decided to schedule your sister's surgery at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Do you think there is a problem? Director Meow said to me politely. I was stunned and asked, no, Director Meow, about the surgery fee. Didn't you pay the surgery fee? Director Meow was even more confused than me. My eyes widened. Director Mia said to me again, smiling slightly, Mr. Lin, your sister has lived here for 2 years. You have that kind of relationship with the dean, why didn't you tell me earlier? Me and the dean? I was even more confused. After all, how could I know the dean? If I had that kind of relationship with the dean, how could Lin Minute not have used the medicine even though she was so sick? Mr. Lin, I have to have surgery tomorrow. I'll rest first. Director Miao hung up the phone. Because of the relationship, her voice was obviously much warmer and gentler than before, making her sweet voice even more charming. Suddenly, I was looking forward to her appearance. But what confused me more was who paid the medical expenses for me. Chapter 27. There must be a reason. Chuckles are chuckles. Just as I was confused, a laugh came, and I couldn't help but frown when I heard it. Yu Mengyang, I turned around and saw that it was indeed her. She changed her clothes again, not the one she wore when she went to dinner. This time she wore a black hip skirt, matched with a purple cardigan with straps which perfectly outlined her graceful figure. The place where the straps crossed on her chest was decorated with a small flower. It set off the fullness of her chest. Under the light, coupled with her charming smile, it was definitely full of temptation. Even if I didn't like her, I couldn't help but take a deep breath and asked, "Why are you here?" "I came to see you." She pursed her lips and smiled slightly, walked over and put her hand on my shoulder, leaning against me. I frowned and looked around. "Are you looking for Muran?" She didn't come. She saw through my meaning and laughed. "Who is looking for her?" I was so anxious to borrow money from Lee Moran just now, but she was on a date. I was inexplicably upset, but suddenly someone helped me pay for the surgery. I still hoped that this person was Lee Moran. Really? She didn't come. Are you disappointed? Yu Menyang stared at me and giggled and leaned towards me. I couldn't stand her temptation and hurriedly stepped aside and said, "I'm busy, I don't have time to play with you." "No time." Yu Menyang laughed, and when she saw me leaving, she twisted her body and said, "Lin Yi, if you dare to take a step now, believe it or not, I can ask the hospital to cancel your sister's surgery." "What?" I was stunned, turned my head and saw her looking at me with a smug look, frowned and asked, "Did you pay for my sister's medical expenses? Who else would treat you so well besides me?" Yu Menyang took Lee Moran's car keys and put them in her hand, turning around and walking towards me. "Let's go, accompany me to a place." I glanced in the direction of my sister's ward. Yu Menyang knew what I meant, and smiled and said, "Don't worry, I've told the dean that I will help your sister's surgery, you don't need to worry, just follow me." She said and took the lead to walk out of the hospital. I took a look, and when I saw her white and tender thighs, the direction was deviated, which scared me and I quickly stabilized. She smiled at me as if nothing had happened. "Drive carefully." I didn't dare to answer and drove seriously. She leaned her feet against the car window and stretched her waist and said, "How about this? If you promise me to pursue Lee Moran, I will give you 30,000 yuan every month in the future." 30,000? I looked at her in confusion, not understanding what she meant. I am a designer. In fact, I don't get 30,000 yuan a month on average from Lee Moran's company every year, but at least I make a living based on my ability. Yu Menyang suddenly gave me 30,000 yuan and didn't ask me to do anything. Even if I was moved, I didn't dare to agree. After all, no merit should be accepted. Besides, I was even more curious about why she spent so much money to let me pursue Lee Moran. What good would it be for her if I pursued Lee Moran? She is Lee Moran's best friend. Shouldn't Lee Moran meet someone better? Comparatively speaking, I still feel that I can't be worthy of Lee Moran. Yu Menyang saw my doubts and smiled gently. "Yes, as long as you agree to pursue Lee Moran and listen to me in the future, I will give you 30,000. Can you give me a reason?" I looked at her and asked. Yu Menyang shook her head. "No reason, I just want you to be happy. You have a lot of money, so burn it." I don't know why I got angry when I heard her funny words. "Yes, I do have a lot of money." She looked at me and giggled. "Not only do I have a lot of money, I also know that you don't have money. Even if your sister's surgery is successful, won't she need other expenses in the future? The recovery period, convalescence period, and nutritional supplements all cost money." I knew she was right, but I still didn't dare to take this money, so I didn't answer her, just thinking she was a psychopath. She was not in a hurry. She looked at me and said, "Lin Yi, if you agree, I will arrange the best therapist to accompany your sister during the recovery period. What do you think?" Her words moved me, but I always felt that if I agreed to Yu Mengyang, it would be a betrayal of Lee Moran. No matter what, she is my boss. I looked at the road ahead and saw that I could park the car next to it. I simply drove to the side and stopped the car. I looked back at Yu Mengyang and said, Mr. Yu, if you want me to pursue Lee Moran, I can agree to it, but can you give me a reason? And what if Lee Moran doesn't like me? Reason, he. Yu Mengyang smiled coquettishly and said, it's very simple. You kissed her little mouth in the elevator and pushed her. This is a reason. What kind of reason is this? My forehead suddenly wrinkled into a black line and I was speechless to her. Why is this reason not enough? She looked at me with interest instead. I said impatiently, what kind of reason is this? It was an accident in the elevator, okay. What if I tell you that Lee Moran actually has emergency misogyny? Chapter 28 Stress Misogyny. Stress misogyny, what the hell? I frowned and looked at Yu Mengyang in confusion. Yu Mengyang smiled at me coquettishly again, you can check it out on Baidu, I'll wait for you. Fairy, she is definitely a fairy, her coquettish voice is like scratching your heart, making you itchy. I didn't dare to look at her more, and hurriedly opened Baidu to search for the symptoms she mentioned. As soon as I searched, I was stunned. Stress misogyny is a kind of physical trauma which is usually left by some kind of psychological damage in childhood. Misogyny is that Lee Moran will feel disgusted with all men. Suddenly I understood why Lee Moran was so indifferent, it turned out to be sick. When I thought about Lee Moran's behavior in the elevator, I gradually understood why Lee Moran was so scared when someone squeezed in and why Yu Mengyang was so nervous to protect her. It's because she is sick, stress misogyny. It doesn't make sense when I think about it. When Lee Moran was drunk, I kissed her and hugged her, and she didn't resist. And she didn't have any problem with me being so close to her in the elevator. Yu Mengyang saw me frowning, she guessed what I was thinking, and smiled charmingly, Lin Yi, you don't have to think about why Lee Moran doesn't dislike you. In fact, I am also confused why she doesn't dislike you. But she just doesn't dislike you, so. Is that why you want me to chase her? I frowned. Yu Mengyang was obviously stunned, then smiled and said, that's right, it's because she doesn't dislike you, I don't think she has discovered it herself, so I want you to pursue her, and the purpose of doing this is to help her cure her illness. The amount of information Yu Mengyang gave was really too much. For a moment, I was in a trance and couldn't accept it. I frowned and thought for a long time and felt something was wrong. Lee Moran started playing the hookup app. Maybe she is still dating someone now, she has such a disease. Yu Mengyang, are you making up a random reason here to make me pursue Lee Moran? I stared at Yu Mengyang and asked. Yu Mengyang glared at me, is there any candy for teasing you? Besides, whether she is sick or not, you will know it by observing carefully in the future. I thought carefully about it. After entering the company and being in contact with Lee Moran for such a long time, I really didn't see Lee Moran get close to any man. Even if any male employee in the company got close to her, she would instinctively step back. It is indeed very similar to the description of the emergency misogyny disorder on Baidu. I frowned, looked at Yu Mengyang and asked, Mr. Yu, if you say so, Lee Moran is she? You want to ask, is she still a virgin? I was too embarrassed to say it, but Yu Mengyang helped me to say it directly. I nodded. Yu Mengyang glared at me with resentment and said, Lin Yi, I find you are really a little stupid. She is misogyny, so she must be a virgin. Will she have contact with men? Then I still couldn't believe that Lee Moran had this disease, but she didn't dislike me. Before I finished speaking, Yu Mengyang said impatiently, what are you talking about? Misogyny can meet the right man and won't dislike him. You have to be confident in yourself. Maybe you are Lee Moran's true love. I am Lee Moran's true love. I widened my eyes and really didn't dare to think about it. What excited me the most was that Lee Moran was a virgin. I was still indignant when I knew she was using the hookup app. I never thought she was a virgin. What was her purpose in using the hookup app? Yu Mengyang saw my expression and pushed me, hey. Now I've made it clear to you, do you agree or not? Agree. I took a deep breath and agreed. The whole thing is good for me, and Yu Mengyang seems to be doing it for Lee Moran's good. Even if I'm afraid of her, she did pay for my sister's surgery and found a connection for me. Besides, my sister's recovery will indeed cost money. If Yu Mengyang can help me, it's not a bad thing. Besides, Lee Moran is a virgin. When I thought she was still a virgin, I couldn't help but pull my throat and swallow my saliva. Even though I don't have a virgin complex, I always felt that Lee Moran should not be a virgin a long time ago, and I even found out that it was her who played the hookup app with me. I thought she was just aloof on the outside, but a slut behind the scenes. Now that I suddenly know she is still a virgin, how can I not be excited? Be more straightforward. You are so nagging. Seeing that I agreed, Yu Mengyang smiled and said, okay, let's drive quickly. If we don't leave now, we may not be able to make it tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning? I was stunned and asked with wide eyes, Mr. Yu, where are we going? My sister has to have surgery tomorrow morning. I have arranged the surgery for you. It doesn't matter whether you are here or not. Yu Mengyang rolled her eyes at me, looking impatient, completely different from the way she teased me before. I saw her frowning slightly. As if she had something on her mind, just when I was about to ask, she urged me, okay, drive quickly, and talk while driving. Okay. I nodded, restarted the car and drove forward. Just after driving a few steps, I asked, hey, Mr. Yu, if you let me drive, you should at least tell me a destination. Jinghai Luoyuan County. Why are we going there? I asked in confusion. Don't worry about it, just drive. She took out her mobile phone and took a look, then said, you drive for a while, I'll lie down and rest for a while, and if you're sleepy later, I'll drive. Oh. I responded and saw her put down the seat, curled up and fell asleep, squinting her eyes, her charming face facing me. The street light shone on her little face through the windshield, flickering as the car moved. There was a charming and seductive breath. I was driving, so I couldn't look too much, so I took a glance and drove seriously. As I drove, I couldn't help but get nervous and sighed as I thought about really chasing after Lee Moran. Yu Mengyang, who had her eyes closed, heard my sigh and said, don't be nervous. Isn't it just chasing after a woman? Why are you so scared? Besides, if you can catch up with Lee Moran, you won't have to worry about your next life, so you should thank me. I looked at her and frowned and said, Mr. Yu, if you want me to chase after Lee Moran, do I have to catch her and make her fall in love with me? That depends on you. If you can get her into bed one day, that's your ability, and you can be considered to have caught up with her. Yu Mengyang still leaned there and said to me. I frowned and asked, what if I can't catch her? Chapter 29. Just get a room. We'll talk about it if you can't catch her. She twisted her body and said, anyway, I will help you. If you only agree with your mouth but don't take action, don't blame me for being rude. You help me. I smiled embarrassedly and shook my head and said, I think it's better to forget it. Just let me catch her by myself. You just need to play with me less in the future. Why, you promised to catch Lee Moran, and you're going to dump me in an instant. She suddenly sat up and stared at me and said coquettishly. I was startled, what are you doing? It's okay, I want to sleep, it's you who keeps making noises. She glared at me. Go to sleep, I won't make noises. I responded and stopped talking and drove carefully. We drove for almost half an hour. I didn't listen to Yu Mengyang's words. I turned back and glanced at her. She was indeed curled up and fell asleep, holding herself with both hands and holding her belly a little above, directly squeezing out the beautiful scenery on her chest. We had been driving for such a long time, and I was a little sleepy. Looking at the white and tender ditch, I instantly became energetic. In addition, the car was on the highway and there were no cars at night. I occasionally glanced at it, and I really wanted to reach out and touch it. I thought about it, but I didn't dare. Who knows what kind of person this little goblin is? Sometimes it's like this, sometimes it's like that. Thinking carefully, it feels quite mysterious. I have known her for less than 24 hours and she wants me to do things and chase Lee Moran. Lee Moran has such a disease. As we get closer and closer to Luoyuan County, Jinghai City, I am more confused as to why she suddenly asked me to come here in the middle of the night. Luoyuan County is a prefecture-level county in Jinghai City. 200 or 300 kilometers, plus I sleep during the day, so I am not sleepy. Although Yu Mengyang said that if I was sleepy, I would let her drive, but I still drove all the way to Luoyuan County. After exiting the highway, it was only 1 o'clock in the morning. I shouted, Mr. Yu, we are here, wake up. She didn't hear me, and we were just about to reach the highway exit. The road conditions were complicated, so I couldn't look back to see her, and reached out to push her. As a result, I didn't pay attention and my hand reached directly in front of her chest. I touched that softness. I was startled and couldn't help pinching it. The feeling of full of softness and elasticity made me pinch it again. Do you like to touch it? Yu Mengyang said. I looked back and I exclaimed and quickly retracted my hand. Sorry, I just wanted to wake you up, not on purpose. I asked you if you like to touch it. She suddenly sat up and looked at me. I glanced at her and saw her staring at me and nodded honestly, yes, yes. Do you want to touch it again? She asked. I shuddered and asked, can I? Yes, why not? Yu Mengyang said with a smile, anyway, touching me won't cost me a piece of flesh. I'll let you touch me. When I go back tomorrow, I'll tell Lee Moran about this and say that her driver touched me secretly. I smiled with a sad face. Mr. Yu, are you kidding me? You are kidding me, okay. She snorted at me, glanced at the road ahead and said, it's still early, go find a hotel to sleep first, and do it tomorrow. Tomorrow? I frowned and said angrily, you're going to do it tomorrow, so why did you make me rush over here in the middle of the night? Can't I get up early? She pouted and snorted. I was really speechless and couldn't do anything about her. Since she paid for my surgery and saved my sister, I didn't say anything more and drove to find a hotel obediently. The highway exit is not far from the county town. After driving for 20 minutes, I found a nice hotel. After entering, I thought I would book 2 rooms. But Yu Mengyang booked 1 room. After checking in, I asked in surprise, Mr. Yu, how can you sleep in 1 room? I can sleep, can't you? She smiled, yawned and walked into the elevator. When we got to the room, I saw that she only had 1 bed in the room and it was a big round bed. It looked like a couple's room. I smiled bitterly and said, Mr. Yu, you booked a room and a bed. Are you sure you want to sleep in the same bed with me tonight? Why haven't you slept with a woman? She glared at me. Compared with my fuss, she was very calm. She twisted her body and went directly to the bathroom to pee. I looked at the bed and still felt amused. What's more confusing is that Yu Mengyang is really not afraid of me. Will she be beastly? Yu Mengyang finished peeing quickly, yawned, and rushed to the bed. Okay, if there is anything, let's talk about it tomorrow morning. I'm so sleepy. She rushed and pulled the quilt and lay down. Mr. Yu, no, are you sure you trust me so much? I couldn't help but ask curiously. It's okay, have you forgotten that you are the man who wants to pursue Lee Moran, and I am Lee Moran's best friend? She squinted her eyes and smiled. I shook my head. Even so, aren't you afraid that I will be beastly? That's nothing, unless you want your sister's operation to fail. She still closed her eyes and said the most vicious words in a harmless tone. I trembled all over when I heard it. I didn't expect that she would threaten me with this. Even if I burst tonight, I have to endure it. Seeing her lying there peacefully, moving and charming, I really hate it. Don't let me move, can't I open 2 rooms? Is it necessary to play me like this? I snorted indignantly, thinking that she was not afraid to sleep with me, so why should I be afraid? At most, I would just not touch her. I took a deep breath and lay down on the bed. The soft bed, I pressed on it, and we both leaned towards the middle, and her delicate body pressed directly against me. Even though we were both wearing clothes, I still felt the warmth coming from her body. How could a young man like me bear this? I looked at her and I felt it directly. The discomfort of having a stunning beauty lying next to you and not being able to touch her was probably worse than the 10 tortures of the Qing dynasty. I took out my phone to divert my attention, opened the hookup app out of habit, looked at Lee Moran's profile picture, and hesitated for a moment. I still sent her a message. Even if I believe that Lee Moran has the emergency misogyny disorder, I am still curious about why Lee Moran has such a disease and uses hookup apps. Are you there? Lee Moran replied quickly, it's so late, aren't you asleep yet? I thought you were asleep, but I was too embarrassed to send you a message. Chapter 30 Knowing the Reason. As soon as I saw Lee Moran's reply, I instantly perked up and replied to her, we are so familiar with each other, what is there to be embarrassed about? I'm just afraid that there will be someone around you, which will affect you later. Lee Moran replied quickly, and she also added a naughty expression. Between the lines, I can see that she should be in a good mood. I immediately laughed at myself, I'm single, how could there be someone around me? After saying this, I couldn't help but glance at Yu Mengyang who was lying next to me. I was really afraid that she would suddenly wake up, hide over there and peek at the screen and find that I was chatting with Lee Moran, then it would be over. Then I guess she has another handle in her hand. Her personality is definitely capable of peeking at the screen. Fortunately, Yu Mengyang was really tired and she didn't care about her image when she was sleeping there, hugging a corner of the quilt, with her mouth wide open. Even though her image is not good, it does not affect her beauty at all. With one foot on the quilt, she looks tempting. With her mouth wide open, her tongue licked her dry lips from time to time. She was no longer weird, but looked a little cute in a peaceful manner. I couldn't help but reach out to help her lift her bangs. Looking at her charming face carefully, I felt that she seemed very cute. I even had the urge to hug her. Ding dong. Suddenly, my phone vibrated, which scared me. I quickly pressed the screen and was relieved to see that Yu Mengyang was not woken up. I took a look at her graceful figure exposed outside, looked at her white waves, took a deep breath, and quickly pulled up the quilt to cover it. It was too tempting. I was really afraid that I would not be able to bear it if I looked at it more. I turned my head and looked at my phone. It was Lee Moran who replied to me, "You are so handsome, how come there is no one around you?" She still had a questioning expression. Thinking that she was so cold and cute, I suddenly became interested and quickly replied, "I think this kind of thing depends on fate. After all, it is difficult to meet someone before the fate comes." After replying, I couldn't help but look back at Yu Mengyang. Seeing her sleeping peacefully, I was very curious about how she would be so relieved to sleep in the same bed with me when I had only known her for less than 24 hours. Was she really not afraid that I would do something beastly? Or was she deliberately seducing me? I thought it was unrealistic. She must have thought that she could still control my sister's surgery. She was sure that she had me in her hands, so she dared to do this. Lee Moran quickly replied again, "That's true. Many times it depends on fate." I replied with a hum and took the opportunity to ask about myself. As for my affairs, I could see that Lee Moran was reluctant to say more. I was afraid that if I asked too much, my identity would be exposed. I stopped the topic and finally couldn't help asking, "What is the purpose of your playing this software?" After this sentence was uttered, I kept staring at the screen. I wanted to confirm whether Yu Mengyang had lied to me. It was obvious that even after chatting with me for so long on this hookup software, she was still on guard. I waited for a long time. She replied, "I am sick." When I saw the reply, I frowned and typed a few question marks. "Do you know what emergency disorder is?" she asked me back. When I saw this emergency disorder, I immediately thought of what Yu Mengyang said. I had searched on Baidu, so of course I understood it, but I knew that this was an extremely rare mental illness, so I pretended not to know. Lee Moran explained it to me. I pretended to be enlightened and replied to her, "So, you play this software to overcome this psychological barrier?" "Yes." She replied, and then sent another string of text, "If you care, we can stop chatting in the future." "Care?" she asked. She smiled, "Aren't you playing this software for hookups?" I finally understood what she meant, smiled and replied, "Yes, but not. Even if it's hookups, I want to find someone I really have feelings for, otherwise I wouldn't have a girlfriend now." She thought for a while before replying, "It seems to make sense." I smiled again and said, "How is it possible? You are so beautiful and you are sick. We have been together for so long and we have more or less some feelings. I am not a beast. I know you are sick and will block you directly. Thank you." She replied with two simple words. I could still see that she was quite touched, so I replied while the iron was hot, "Actually, if you are willing, I am willing to accompany you in treatment and recovery. Are you willing?" She didn't reply. But I could feel that she was definitely touched. She was indeed touched, and after a long time she replied to me, "Thank you. In fact, I use this software to overcome this psychological barrier, but I have never met someone like you. Many times, some people add me and ask me out right away, alas." She sighed. "Of course, I know that if a beautiful woman appears on this kind of software, there will definitely be many men who greet her. This is the norm in society. When I started playing this software, wasn't it also because I wanted to date a high-quality woman? The last time I came, I never thought that the first one I dated was Lee Moran. She used the hookup software for this purpose. It was like I had untied my knot about her, and I felt relieved. However, thinking about whether she was a virgin, I took a deep breath before I plucked up the courage to ask, "Excuse me, does having this disease mean that you are still a virgin?" She did not reply directly, but just sent a shy expression. When I saw this expression, I almost jumped up with excitement. Yu Mengyang told me that she was a virgin, but I was not very excited. Now that Lee Moran told me personally, I was really too excited. I don't have a virgin complex. I was just happy that Lee Moran was still a virgin. Suddenly, I thought that if I could chase Lee Moran, it seemed to be a good choice. But when I thought about her identity, I felt it was not very realistic. I promised Yu Mengyang to chase Li Moran, just to deal with her. I really had no idea how to chase her. What about you? Li Moran suddenly asked. I looked at her and sent a shy expression. The two of them were tacitly aware of each other and stopped sending messages to each other. I lay down and touched Yu Mengyang's calf, feeling the warmth coming from her body. It was really uncomfortable and I wanted to touch her secretly. But I didn't have the courage. I didn't know how long I was tormented in my heart before I fell asleep in a daze. The next morning, I hadn't woken up yet, but I felt something moving underneath me. I frowned, looked up, and was so scared that my whole body trembled. I cursed, "Psycho, what are you moving around for? Are you uncomfortable?" Yu Mengyang smiled gently. I was speechless and I didn't expect Yu Mengyang to be so bold. Last night, she was lying down and I didn't dare to touch her. She actually took advantage of me before I woke up and played with me secretly. I saw her staring at my crotch. I smiled bitterly and pulled the quilt over her. "Miss Yu, can you stop teasing me?" Chapter 31. Another day of being teased. I really didn't expect Yu Mengyang to be so bold. She doesn't shy away from this at all. Psycho. I was sleeping soundly in the morning, and when I opened my eyes and saw someone lying there teasing you, no one would be in a good mood, so I scolded her. Yu Mengyang pouted her lips, unconvinced when I scolded her. "Am I crazy? You are the one who is thinking nonsense in the early morning, blame me." "Sister, that's Chen." I snorted in anger and finally shook my head and didn't say much. Because when I saw her like that, I knew it, she was teasing me on purpose. You can never wake up a person who pretends to sleep, and it's useless for me to say more to her. "Chen what?" She was interested, and she sat one step closer to me with her butt sticking out. I was really speechless. The reaction was strong in the morning, and how could I resist her temptation, so I just got up from the bed. "Why are you getting up?" "Play with it again." "I didn't play enough just now. It bounces and bounces. It's so fun." Yu Mengyang smiled evilly, got off the bed and chased me. My scalp was numb instantly and I quickly hid in the bathroom. I closed the door and breathed a sigh of relief. I stuck to the door and looked at the unique charm of my man and I blushed. Yu Mengyang looked indifferent. She still wanted to play. What kind of fairy? I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Hearing Yu Mengyang knocking on the door, I glanced at myself. I still had enough money. There was no need to hide it. Let it show up and scare her. I didn't believe that she would dare to play after I took off my pants. Just when I wanted to pull down my pants and go out to let her see it, I thought that my sister's surgery hadn't been done yet. Who knows what she was thinking in her mind? If she really scared her, I would be the one who suffered. Forget it, I'll spare you." I shook my head, put it away and went to the toilet to pee. It took me a long time to pee. Which? I couldn't help but curse Yu Mengyang again. She was so beautiful. If I hadn't been so cautious about her, I really wanted to compete with her. I didn't believe that a woman like her could take advantage of me in this regard. At most, I would give her my virginity. "Lin Yi, how long are you going to hide in the bathroom? Hurry up, we're leaving." As soon as I finished peeing, Yu Mengyang urged me outside. I opened the door and saw that she was still putting on makeup and tidying up. She asked depressedly, "Where are you going?" "Go dry first." She held the makeup box, looked at the small mirror of the makeup box, and spit lipstick. In fact, her sexy little lips would be so charming without applying anything. She obviously understood this truth. The lipstick she applied was not the bright red color, but a light layer with a little pink. I didn't know what color it was. Just seeing her put on lipstick, her lips were bright pink, which made me feel distracted. "Does it look good?" She smacked her lips at me. "It looks good." I nodded honestly. "Do you want to kiss me?" She smiled at me with her lips pursed and her body moved a step closer to me. "Yes." I swallowed nervously and my body instinctively moved towards her. She also slowly tiptoed, and at that moment I felt that my breathing was about to stop and my throat kept moving. It was about to kiss and she stretched out her hand and pushed me. "What are you thinking about? If you want to kiss, I will give it to you." I tilted my face to the side and my mouth felt uncomfortable as if I had eaten a dead fly. Hee hee. Yu Mengyang seemed very happy and she looked up at me proudly and walked into the bathroom and did not forget to say to me, "Don't be in a daze, go downstairs first." "Okay, drive." I gritted my teeth and walked downstairs unwillingly. Thinking of her enchanting red lips, I felt depressed and panicked. I also blamed myself for what I had done. I knew she was a goblin, but I still messed with her. Alas! I sighed and got in the car first. As soon as I got in the car, I smelled the fragrance that came to my nose. It was the fragrance of Lee Moran. I immediately felt bad. I left in a hurry yesterday. I didn't ask for leave from Lee Moran. I came to be the driver of her bestie privately. It was definitely overstepping my authority. This is a big taboo in the workplace. If Lee Moran misunderstands that I have any thoughts about her bestie, how can I live in the company in the future? I hurriedly took out my mobile phone to call Lee Moran to ask for leave, and Yu Mingyang came. Do you want to ask for leave from Moran? She came up and leaned on the car window and smiled at me. I nodded. I asked for leave for you. Just be my driver. Yu Mingyang smiled at me, opened the car door and sat in. But I saw her sitting in the back seat. Where are we going? To Luoyuan Convention and Exhibition Center. She said, holding her phone in both hands and chatting with someone unknown. For some reason, I felt a little uncomfortable. It's done. I snorted and stepped on the accelerator. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror and she shook her body. She was not frightened as I imagined. She was not affected at all and was still typing on the phone keyboard. Seeing that she still had a smile on her lips, I asked uncomfortably, "Who are you chatting with?" As soon as I finished speaking, she put away her phone, poked her head from the middle of the seat and looked at me with a smile. "What's wrong? Are you jealous?" Jealous? Although I felt a little uncomfortable, I still said it stubbornly and sneered at her. "You are not my girlfriend, you can chat with whoever you want, why should I be jealous?" Really? She giggled and squeezed forward again. "How about I be your girlfriend?" What? I glared at her, and I was so excited that I almost mistook the accelerator for the brake. Fortunately, I reacted in time and stepped on the brake. The car turned and I stabilized the steering wheel. She bumped her head against my shoulder when I braked suddenly, and she touched her head aggrievedly. "Why are you so excited?" I calmed down and said, "It's not excitement, can you stop teasing me every day?" Although I have good conditions and heard many people praise me for being handsome, I am not narcissistic enough to make a woman throw herself at me after just one day of contact, let alone a goddess like Yu Mingyang. Yu Mingyang saw that I didn't believe it, and pouted her lips and said, "I don't have a boyfriend. Why do I tease you when I want to be your girlfriend? Can't you have more confidence in yourself?" Chapter 32. I am her boyfriend. Speaking of confidence, I have always been very confident in myself, but it depends on who I am with. Facing Yu Mingyang and Lee Moran, the proud daughters of heaven, I really have no confidence. In addition, I had known her for just over 20 hours in one day, and she had played tricks on me countless times. How could I believe her? I looked back at her, but I saw her blinking at me. Her eyes were full of expectation and sincerity. I was confused and moved, but fortunately, I have never been a person who is ambitious. I quickly calmed down and turned to drive. "Lin Yi, I'm telling you the truth, why don't you believe it?" She pursed her lips and snorted. I laughed at myself. "Miss Yu, I know my own weight." "You? If you are bored, just play with your phone and don't affect my driving, okay?" "Lin Yi, you don't believe me, or you don't have confidence in yourself." She sat back in her seat and looked at me with a mocking face. I knew at first glance that she was trying to trick me again. I was not stupid enough to be fooled. I chose to ignore it. I drove the car well and didn't ask for leave for Lee Moran. I drove her car again. If I really hit her car, it would be a big deal if I didn't explain it when I went back. Ah. Seeing that I didn't say anything, she sighed and said, "You said you are so confident, and you still want to seduce Lee Moran. How do you seduce her?" I promised her to pursue Lee Moran, but it was just a pursuit. I really had no idea how to pursue and whether I could pursue her. Just her words made me curious. I saw the red light came, turned around and drove, and asked while driving, "Mr. Yu, you said you wanted me to pursue Lee Moran, and now you say you want to be my girlfriend. Aren't you contradicting yourself? What's wrong? I have a good relationship with Moran, so I can't be your girlfriend at the same time." She smiled slightly. I suddenly widened my eyes when I heard it. If one of them can really be my girlfriend, I will wake up laughing in my dreams, and at the same time, I dare not even think about that scene. Seeing my astonishment, she glanced at me and grinned. "Why are you so scared? Haven't you ever thought about this problem?" "No. I shook my head seriously. I really didn't lie to you, Mengyang. Yu Mengyang chuckled and said, I said you have no confidence, but you still don't believe it. I think you are just a coward and don't even dare to think about it. Alas. What do you mean you don't dare to think about it? I was unhappy when I heard her words and snorted, if you really want to be my girlfriend, do you think I dare to think about having 2 relationships at the same time? You mean if I become your girlfriend, you dare to pursue Lee Moran? She smiled provocatively. I glanced at her. Although I knew she was probably teasing me, looking at her graceful body and charming face, I still had a glimmer of hope. I took a deep breath and gritted my teeth and said, I dare. Hee hee. She smiled happily and said, okay, then I'm your girlfriend today, but you can't not chase Lee Moran. Chase? I said firmly. Hubby. She heard me and called me coquettishly. The delicate voice made all the pores on my body relax and I felt a little ecstatic. Wife. I shouted uncertainly. Hey. She responded, and seeing my ecstatic look, she laughed and said, watch the road. Turn left ahead and you'll be there. Oh. I responded and hurriedly looked at the navigation that had been turned on for a long time, and sure enough, we had arrived. I drove into the exhibition parking lot, stopped the car, and saw Yu Mengyang getting ready to get off. I turned my head and looked at her and asked, were you serious just now? Serious? When have I ever lied to you? Yu Mengyang smiled at me, opened the door and got out. This happiness came too suddenly. I saw her get off the car, hurriedly unbuckled my seat belt and ran down. I stood in front of her, still at a loss, nervous and didn't know what to say. Silly. She laughed, stretched out her hand and hugged my arm, her enchanting body pressed against me, and her plump and full place pressed against my arm. I felt like I was going to fly. I glanced at her full place, swallowed my saliva, and quickly advised myself to calm down. If I made a move that shouldn't have happened in public, it would be really embarrassing. She didn't seem to care. Seeing my expression, she hugged me tighter and said with a smile, husband, let's go. The word husband made me feel like I was floating in the sky. Happiness came too suddenly and my mind was instantly blank. She hugged me and walked into the hall of the exhibition center. When I arrived at the hall, I found that this was actually an adult products exhibition. I was stunned and glanced at Yu Mengyang in surprise. Yu Mengyang saw me looking at her and frowned and said, what are you doing? No, you come here just to see these? I asked in astonishment. Is it not possible? Yu Mengyang pouted. That's not the case. I shook my head and looked at the exhibition. I dare not say that there were a lot of people, but there was a flow of people. People came in one after another, and some people left after seeing them. From time to time, someone passed by us and I felt embarrassed. On the other hand, Yu Mengyang seemed to be fine. She let me go and looked here and there. I really didn't expect that she had such a hobby. After a careful look, she didn't seem to be looking at those adult products exhibits, but more like looking for someone in the exhibition. Anyway, I couldn't figure out what she was thinking. I didn't think much about it. Looking at those adult products, I had to admire the imagination of these product designers. I designed underwear and I felt embarrassed if the fabric design was less. They can actually design toys for men and women. Amazing, amazing. I followed Yu Mengyang and looked at the bold exhibits in the window. I saw an SM prop in a cabinet. Whip, black leather belt, and restraint belt. My mind suddenly showed how exciting it would be if it was given to Yu Mengyang. Mengyang. I was about to call her and let her take a good look. But I saw Yu Mengyang staring at a man and shouted, by Jinyao, what a coincidence. Bai Jinyao was also stunned when he saw Yu Mengyang. He looked back and looked around, frowned and asked, Yu Mengyang, why are you here? Who are you with? Hurry up and leave. I saw this man reaching out to push Yu Mengyang. I couldn't help but frown, walked up, put my arm around Yu Mengyang's waist, and asked softly, wife, how did you meet an acquaintance? When Bai Jinyao saw me, his hand was suspended in the air, and he awkwardly took it back and rubbed it. He ignored me, but looked at Yu Mengyang with a gloomy face and asked, Yu Mengyang, who is this? Oh, I'm her boyfriend, Lin Yi. I didn't wait for Yu Mengyang to answer, and hugged her tightly and replied. Chapter 33 Kissed Yu Mengyang. Boyfriend. Bai Jinyao frowned and stared at me with a fierce look in his eyes. I was not to be outdone, staring at him and making eye contact with him. From his expensive suit, I could tell that Bai Jinyao was very rich, and the watch he just casually showed was a classic Patek Philippe Nautilus. The cheapest watch costs more than 500,000 yuan, and he can wear such an expensive watch. I was indeed shocked when I saw it. On the contrary, it doesn't matter. After all, there are thousands of rich people in the world. He has money, but it's his money, not mine. I have always seen through this point. I am not like some people who speak politely when they see rich people and they can't wait to pounce on them and lick them. Even if they know that those rich people will not give them any benefits, they still rush to lick them. I look down on these people. Besides, this is a society ruled by law, and I don't rely on Bai Jinyao for food. He stared at me, so I stared at him. Seeing that I was not afraid at all, he frowned, turned around and reached out to pull Yu Mengyang. "What are you doing?" I shouted immediately. Bai Jinyao glanced at me and ignored me. From his eyes, I knew that he looked down on me and didn't want to bother with me. He really ignored me, looked down at me, and asked Yu Mengyang, is he really your boyfriend? Yeah. Yu Mengyang nodded, and when she looked at Bai Jinyao again, she nodded obviously with a guilty conscience. I felt very uncomfortable when I saw this. She can tease and play with me unscrupulously and keep saying that she wants to be my girlfriend. When it comes to someone else, she is as obedient as a little sheep. I hugged Yu Mengyang's slender waist in dissatisfaction and looked at Bai Jinyao provocatively. Bai Jinyao obviously saw it, his brow sank, but he still ignored me and smiled coldly at Yu Mengyang. "Yu Mengyang, if this is your choice, I can respect you, but..." He glanced at me, sneered, and suddenly leaned close to Yu Mengyang's ear. I saw his action, frowned, and just wanted to push him away, but Yu Mengyang held me back, and I was stunned. Bai Jinyao leaned close to Yu Mengyang's ear. "You will regret it." After saying that, he stood up and adjusted the buttons of his suit, and was about to leave freely. "Hey! What do you mean you will regret it? What did you say? Are you threatening my girlfriend?" I shouted at him and went up to stop him. Yu Mengyang held me back. "Lin Yi, don't mess around." "Nonsense." I was stunned, looking at her sad face, and sneered, "Why do you regret letting me be your boyfriend?" "What?" Yu Mengyang frowned. I glanced at the people coming and going around me and didn't say much, but walked out of the exhibition. "Lin Yi, where are you going?" Yu Mengyang chased me. When I arrived at the entrance of the exhibition, I realized it was raining. And Bai Jinyao was there. When he saw me coming out, he glanced at me and turned his head away. I also looked up proudly and ignored him. Yu Mengyang came out at this time, and when she saw Bai Jinyao, her eyebrows couldn't help but frown. I saw that she was obviously afraid of Bai Jinyao, and Bai Jinyao looked arrogant. I felt very uncomfortable when I saw it, especially when I saw Bai Jinyao looking at Yu Mengyang. I was even more dissatisfied. "What are you looking at?" I glared at Bai Jinyao, walked over and hugged Yu Mengyang. Yu Mengyang moaned and pushed me. "Lin Yi, what are you doing?" "Nothing, I just want to hug you." I smiled, put my arms around Yu Mengyang, pressed my body against her, and kissed her. Yu Mengyang snorted and shouted, "What are you doing?" She wanted to hide, but I held her with one hand and I kissed her mouth directly. Yu Mengyang's eyes widened. I pressed her red lips and the tender and mellow taste made me sink. Yu Mengyang moaned, pushed me away, wiped her lips and said, "Lin Yi, what are you doing?" She glanced at Bai Jinyao and wanted to explain. "Boss Bai." At this time, a strong man in a black suit came with an umbrella. Bai Jinyao nodded, glanced at me and Yu Mengyang, put his hands in his pockets and left the strong man in the suit holding an umbrella. Yu Mengyang and I both looked at him and he got into a golden Bentley in a chic manner. However, the car did not leave in a hurry, but drove towards us. Bai Jinyao opened the car window and threw down an umbrella. "It's cold, don't get wet," he said, rolled up the car window and left. I looked back at Yu Mengyang, stared at him, frowned and shouted, "Hey! Let's go, don't look." Yu Mengyang frowned, "You are very nosy." "What do I care about you?" I snorted unhappily, watching the golden Bentley slowly drive out, and a sense of bitterness inexplicably surged in my heart. From the look in Yu Mengyang's eyes at Bai Jinyao, I was sure that her feelings for Bai Jinyao must be complicated, and I guessed that she asked me to come here to use me as a gun. Looking at Bai Jinyao's age, I guessed that he was only a few years older than me. How could he be so rich? I snorted unconvincedly and looked at Yu Mengyang and still looked. "Are you leaving or not?" "If not, I'm leaving," I said, and turned to leave. "Why are you in such a hurry?" She looked back and glared at me, then walked out angrily. "Hey, what are you doing? It's raining heavily." I saw her running into the rain, shouting that I wanted to rush out, but the rain was too heavy, so I hurriedly picked up the umbrella that Bai Jinyao had just thrown away, although I disdained to use the things he had thrown away. But it was raining so heavily and he had already thrown it away, so it would be a waste not to use it. I held up the umbrella and caught up with Yu Mengyang. It's raining heavily, hold it up, don't get wet. I don't want you to care. She pushed me away and continued walking in the heavy rain. I was pushed by her, staggered a step and almost fell down. Seeing her like that, I knew she was angry about Bai Jinyao just now, and I was a little annoyed for a moment, so I simply threw away the umbrella and followed her to the car in the rain. She walked to the side of the car and I hurriedly pressed the key. She angrily opened the door and sat in. I also hurried to the driver's seat and sat in. The rain was so heavy that I felt my underwear was about to get wet. Looking back, Yu Mengyang was also soaked, and her clothes were sticking to her body, outlining her proud figure. Her fair skin was vaguely visible, and I couldn't help swallowing my saliva after taking a glance. Have you seen enough? She stared at me and snorted. I was startled and quickly retracted my eyes. She suddenly stood up and stretched out her hand to slap me in the face. Pa! A crisp sound scared me and trembled all over. I turned my head and looked at her and shouted, "What are you doing? Are you crazy? Who told you to kiss me just now?" She stared at me. "Didn't you say I'm your boyfriend? If so, what's wrong with me kissing you?" I know she actually asked me to pretend to be her boyfriend and use me as a weapon to disgust Bai Jinyao, but I won't admit it and see what she's going to do. Yu Mengyang was speechless for a moment. Looking at her melancholy eyes and the aggrieved look, I felt sorry for her for some reason. "Yu Mengyang, I think you came here today and said that you want me to be your boyfriend, just to make me act with you and piss off Bai Jinyao. How do you know?" Yu Mengyang looked at me in surprise. I sneered, "Can you stop treating people like fools? I respect you only for Li Moran's sake and because Li Moran is my boss. Otherwise, do you think I would care about you?" Chapter 34 Bitten. "Oh, you care about me because of Li Moran?" She stared at me, her face suddenly changed. I didn't notice the change in her expression and smiled coldly. "What else?" Okay, it's all because of Li Moran, then don't worry about me, don't send me back, I'll go by myself." She suddenly shouted at me excitedly, opened the car door and walked out. Why did she suddenly get excited? Was it because of Li Moran? I was stunned for a moment. Seeing that the rain was getting heavier, Yu Mengyang walked out in the rain, hurriedly opened the car door and rushed out, stopping her. "It's raining heavily. What are you doing? I don't want you to care." She snorted, crying and pushed me away. I didn't know what irritated her. I used my hands to block the heavy rain on my head, and seeing that she was going to go out, I begged, "Auntie, it's raining heavily, if there is anything, let's get in the car and talk, okay? Let me go." She cried and pushed me away. The rain was as heavy as falling down, I couldn't stand it anymore, and reached out to hug her. "Ah!" She cried out and slapped me. When she raised her head, the rain splashed into her mouth. She shouted hoarsely, "What are you doing? Let me go." I ignored her and carried her to the car. When I put her down, she slapped me and said, "Why do you care about me? You are just afraid of Li Moran, right? Go away." "I won't tell Li Moran. I really don't know how this matter got involved with Li Moran." I wiped the water off my hair and saw that she was soaked. She was shaking slightly like a drowned chicken. I didn't know what to say. I looked at the tissues in the front row and climbed up to get the tissues from the front row to wipe her. As soon as I stood up, she suddenly grabbed my arm and bit it. It was a real bite. "Ah!" I gasped in pain, slammed my hands and shouted, "Let go, let go." She bit hard, let go of my hand, and grinned at me. I picked up my arm and saw a row of teeth marks. It hurt so much that I almost cried. I wanted to scold her, but when I saw her pouting and a trace of tears in the corners of her eyes, I couldn't get angry. I really felt like I owed her in my previous life. Yu Mengyang saw me staring at her, pouting and said, "Didn't you say you were my boyfriend? Can't you vent for me?" "Oh, bite me and see if it hurts," I said unhappily. I saw that my arm was bitten and bleeding. I guess only people who have been bitten can feel the pain. "It's hot." "Then should I bite you?" Yu Mengyang snorted and handed me her arm. Her arm was pink and tender. I couldn't bear to bite it. She closed her eyes and looked like she was ready to sacrifice herself. Alas! I sighed, turned my head, picked up my arm and blew it to relieve the pain. Does it hurt? Yu Mingyang asked me when she saw that I didn't bite her. What do you think? I glared at her. She blinked her big eyes, pouted her lips and looked at my arm. How about I blow it for you? She said in a soft and considerate voice. If I hadn't been in contact with her for more than a day, I would have been confused by her. When I saw her like this, I just concluded that this goblin was going to do something bad again, and hurriedly leaned towards the car window and retracted my hand. What are you doing? I'm not biting you anymore. Besides, I'm just looking at you. I wouldn't bite any other man if it was me. She turned her head proudly, and she looked cute like a child acting like a spoiled child. I was amused by her and shook my head. Okay, since you are in a bad mood, I won't bother with you. Sit down and talk about where to go. She didn't answer me, but I said, show it to me. No. I twisted my body. Hurry up. She said coquettishly. I was a little annoyed by her and took a deep breath and said, I can show you, but you can't bite. No. She rolled her eyes at me resentfully and said, I just want to see if it hurts and blow it for you. Forget about blowing. I glared at her, really not expecting her to blow me or anything. Besides, it was relieved and not so painful, so I handed my own to her to see. Seeing her staring at it, she complained, look, it's all red, with teeth marks, tell me if you are cruel or not. It's really cruel. She pretended to be distressed and suddenly grabbed my arm. I felt something was wrong and it was too late to pull my hand back. She pounced on me again and bit my arm hard. This time it was even harder than the last time. My scalp was numb with pain and I gritted my teeth and shouted, let go, let go. Haha, you are so stupid. She bit and let go of my hand, sitting and laughing happily. I was in so much pain that I wanted to cry. I thought that I was really stupid. How could I believe that a fairy would be nice to you and tender to you? She called me stupid and I really felt like a fool. Seeing her laugh so unscrupulously and glamorously, I was in so much pain that I couldn't muster any energy. I shouted angrily, are you born in the year of the dog? It's so funny. She didn't answer, she just laughed by herself. I angrily threw the tissue at her, wipe it yourself. After that, I climbed directly from the central control to the driver's seat, started the car and drove towards Jinghai City. Ha ha. She was still laughing happily. I looked at my arm, I was so angry, I just wanted to send her back and go to work at the company. Who wants to be the driver? I won't serve. I drove the car angrily, driving very fast all the way. She laughed for a while and suddenly stuck her head out from the middle of the seat and said, you are angry now. I ignored her directly. Don't be like this. I'm in a bad mood. She stretched out her hand and pushed me to act coquettishly. I'm in a bad mood, you bite me. I shouted angrily and directly shook my hand and shouted, I'm driving. If you don't want to die, sit in the back obediently. I glared at her fiercely. She had never seen me so fierce before. She pouted her little mouth, sat back in the back seat and muttered, humph. Stingy. Stingy, stingy. She shouted several times in a row, her delicate voice was thrilling. However, I still ignored her. After being bitten twice in a row, my arm felt numb and the wound was burning badly. Anyone would be angry. She stopped yelling after a while. I was relieved. I was really afraid that she would do something naughty again. I was still driving and there would be an accident. But it suddenly became quiet. I always had a bad premonition. I didn't know what she was up to. I looked at her through the rearview mirror. Unexpectedly, she was also staring at me. When she saw me looking at her, she said angrily, what are you looking at? I just wanted to take a sneak peek at her, but I didn't expect to be caught. She scolded me again, which scared me. I quickly turned my head back and drove seriously. HMPH. Bite me again. She suddenly said. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry and said, Miss Yu, do you want my hand to be disabled? Give it to me or not? She asked with her head up. No. I'm not that stupid to give someone meat to bite for no reason, unless I'm crazy. I don't understand why she likes to bite people so much. If you don't want to give it to me, then don't give it to me. Why are you so fierce? She snorted, sat back, and wiped her hair with a tissue. I was too lazy to pay attention to her. I knew it must be related to Bai Jinyao just now. She was angry and vented on me. As soon as I saw the teeth marks on my arm, I got angry and drove away. I looked at her from the rearview mirror and saw her wiping her body with a tissue and reaching into her arms. I was stunned. "What are you looking at?" She suddenly snorted at me. Chapter 35. The operation was successful. I swallowed my saliva and said angrily, "If you don't want to see it, then don't look." Driving in the rain, the vision was blurred and I didn't dare to keep looking back at her. I only heard the sound of her wiping with a tissue, which made me feel even more uncomfortable, like a cat scratching. I couldn't help but want to see what she was doing. I was also curious about the relationship between Bai Jinyao and her just now. Why did she get angry? While thinking in confusion, I suddenly heard her say, "Hey. Dean Chen. Oh, that Lin Min's operation, right?" When I heard her mention my sister's operation, I immediately glared and looked back. I saw her looking at me with a proud face and smiled coldly at me. It looked like she was threatening me. I knew she was telling me that my sister's operation still depended on her. The car was already on the highway and couldn't stop, so I had to whisper, "Mr. Yu, Sister Yu, I was wrong." She hung up the phone and asked me, "What's wrong?" I frowned and answered honestly, "I shouldn't have been mean to you, I shouldn't have kissed you just now." "What else?" she asked. I frowned and couldn't remember anything, so I shook my head. "And don't compare me with Lee Moran in the future, okay?" She snorted angrily. "Oh." I responded, feeling that she seemed to be jealous of Lee Moran, and asked in confusion, "Aren't you and Lee Moran's best friends? Why are you jealous of her? And didn't you say that you two have a good relationship? What else? What else?" She snorted, "With your attitude just now, we broke up." "Break up?" I was stunned, and at the same time I felt ridiculous. We just said we were in love and broke up. What's hateful is that this was my first love and it ended in less than an hour. Actually, I know that Yu Mingyang is teasing me. It is very likely that she is using me to piss off Bai Jinyao. Unfortunately, she didn't piss him off, but she pissed herself off. Since she couldn't control Bai Jinyao, she turned to control me. I get angry when I think about it. That bastard is just a little rich, what's so great about him? I thought unwillingly. She suddenly shouted at me, "Bite me again, please." "Ah!" I screamed. The pain in my arm hasn't healed yet, and she wants to bite again. Thinking of my sister's surgery, I took a deep breath, held the steering wheel with one hand, and took the initiative to extend my arm to her. She held my wrist with one hand. I was ready to be bitten again. I gritted my teeth and controlled the steering wheel, fearing that it would hurt too much and something unexpected would happen. Her warm lips came close to me, and I took a breath of cold air nervously. Even the foot on the accelerator increased a little, and the car drove fast. I was ready. She just kissed me and let me go. I looked at her in a daze. "Okay. I'm not born in the year of the dog. I bit you just because I was in a bad mood. Now I'm in a good mood. How can I bear to bite you? If I bite you, who will help me chase Lee Moran? Don't you think so?" Seeing that I didn't understand, she tilted her head and smiled at me. I almost froze, but fortunately I reacted in time and drove the car. Looking at my arm, there was a faint lipstick mark on the tooth mark just now. Looking at her charming red lips, I couldn't help swallowing, savoring the kiss just now, and really wanted to kiss her again. As soon as she saw my expression, she guessed my thoughts immediately. "Do you still want to kiss me?" I was startled and shook my head hurriedly. "No." "Really? Really?" Yu Mingyang sighed helplessly. "Alas, I thought you wanted to. If you wanted to, I would give you another kiss." I looked at her with wide eyes, and she touched her lips with her hand and bit them lightly. That sexy and charming look was really charming. I looked ahead, drove the car, and couldn't help but look back at her. "Do you want to?" she asked gently. I swallowed my saliva. "Yes." Hee hee. She laughed happily. "I know you have bad intentions. Do you really want to get both me and Lee Moran? Do you believe me? I will tell Lee Moran about this." "Ah." I was shocked and said with a smile, "I say, Aunt, you are the one who seduced me. You are so beautiful, so tempting. If it were a normal man, who would not want it?" I was indeed seduced by her. In fact, she is so beautiful, let alone so tempting, just standing there, every frown and smile is fascinating. Fairy, I can only say that she is too fairy. This kind of person is not something I can control at all. I dare to be sure that she is more difficult to control than Lee Moran. Okay. I reluctantly accept this reason. She smiled happily and sat in the back seat obediently. I was relieved immediately. Actually, I was worried that she would do something naughty or weird again along the way. Fortunately, she didn't do anything except go to the service area, go to the restroom, and sit in the passenger seat. Plus, she told me about her sister's surgery on the way. It was very successful. Not only was it very successful, she also used her connections to transfer me to a separate ward for recovery. After 2 years, I finally let go of the worry. For this, I am still very grateful to Yu Mengyang and even feel a little incredible. She gave me 350,000 yuan for surgery after knowing me for less than a day. I don't know how to evaluate her. When Yu Mengyang saw my look, she smiled and said, "What's wrong? Are you excited and happy to know that your sister's surgery was successful? Or are you thanking me?" "Both." I nodded honestly. "Forget thanking me, as long as you help me pursue Muran next time." Yu Mengyang patted my shoulder and said with a carefree look. I looked at her, and my heart was full of mixed feelings. I don't know how to express my feelings for her, it's a bit of a headache. Arriving at Jinghai, the weather cleared up. I originally wanted to go to the hospital to visit my sister. However, seeing that both of us were wet, we had to go back to Li Moran's villa to change clothes. When I got to the villa, I was still a little timid. Yu Mengyang giggled at me, "What's the matter? Afraid of meeting Moran? Didn't you ask for leave for me? Why should I be afraid of her?" After being teased by Yu Mengyang so many times, I naturally knew that the more I showed fear of her, the more she would tease me. In order to prevent her from teasing me again, even if I was afraid, I would not show it in front of her. I went upstairs to her, straightened my clothes and turned around to leave. "Hey! Where are you going? Aren't you going to take a shower?" Yu Mengyang asked me. "There are no clothes for me here. Where can I take a shower?" I glanced at her from the downstairs and waved my hand directly, saying, "Let's go." "Hey!" She called me, and I knew what she wanted to do, so I ran away. Whoever opened the door first bumped into Li Moran, who also opened the door and walked in.